Well, good evening. Going to call today's meeting to order. My name is Erica A. Stewart. I'm the mayor. We have the city council here, and we're going to go ahead and have Councilmember Pease lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you so much. Today is, I think, going to be an emotions up, emotions down, back and forth roller coaster. And we're going to start out with, as some of you probably have seen from the news or heard from someone, we had a recent death from Sean Ogawa Hillman, a student from Cal Poly who was killed on his bike. So I just wanted to give a minute of silence or moment of silence for him and his family. Thank you. Well, now, City Attorney, will you please report out on our closed session?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The council did meet in closed session on one matter of real property negotiations, provided direction on price and terms to negotiating staff as identified on the agenda, and no further reportable action was taken.
Thank you very much. And next, we will have the National Tourism Week and California Tourism Month. And I believe, is Molly Cano picking that up? Or no, it'll be Lydia. Okay, great. Come on down on the podium. I'll read out the resolution, the whereas, that too. The resolution, then I'll bring it on down to you. So whereas tourism is an economic powerhouse for every state and destination across the country with an output of $2.6 trillion in 2022, supporting 14.5 million American jobs, and visitors spent $135 billion in California in 2022, bringing the state 93% of the way back to pre-pandemic levels. Tourism plays a critical role here in the city of San Luis Obispo and the state of California's economic prosperity. The vision for the future of tourism in San Luis Obispo is a welcoming community with a vibrant economy that enriches the lives of visitors and residents alike. The city of San Luis Obispo's tourism tax revenue has increased 77% since 2020, including a record-breaking $10.6 million in 2022. The transient occupancy tax, known as DOT, the revenue contributes 10% of the city's general fund, which pays for community benefits like infrastructure projects and quality of life experiences like access to open space. Now, therefore, I, Erica A. Stewart, Mayor of the City of San Luis Obispo, on behalf of the entire City Council, hereby proclaim the week of May 7th through 13th, 2023 as National Travel and Tourism Week and the month of May 2023 as California Tourism Month in San Luis Obispo, and urge our citizens to join me in recognizing the critical role this industry plays in our community and state.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart and the City Council for this proclamation recognizing the significant contribution our industry makes to the vitality of this community. I am pleased to accept this on behalf of Slow T-Bid Board and the Visit San Luis Obispo team. Thank you. We really appreciate your continued support.
Thank you so much. And next, we have Public Service Week. And will someone be receiving that? Let's see. Oh, Jesus Nolasco. So sorry. Is Jesus Nolasco here? Where in the corner? Oh, there he is. All right, well, we have Public Service Week is also May 7th through 13th. And it's an annual occasion to recognize and honor the dedication, professionalism, and hard work of public servants. at all levels of government, including the employees of the City of San Luis Obispo. The City of San Luis Obispo is committed to providing high-quality services and programs to our residents, visitors, and the businesses, and the tireless efforts of our employees greatly contribute to the success and vibrancy of our city. The employees of the City of San Luis Obispo embody the spirit of public service by actively engaging with the community, collaborating with stakeholders, and finding innovative solutions to complex challenges, thus contributing to the continued progress and prosperity of our city. The City of San Luis Obispo acknowledges the resilience and adaptability demonstrated by its employees, particularly during times of emergencies, crises, and unforeseen events, as they continue to serve the community with unwavering dedication, professionalism, and compassion. Now, therefore, I, Erica A. Stewart, Mayor of the City of San Luis Obispo, on behalf of the entire City Council, hereby celebrate Public Service Week and extend heartfelt appreciation and recognition to all of the employees of the city for their unwavering dedication, hard work, and commitment to the public service.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor and City Council, for passing this proclamation recognizing public service. I am honored to work for the city and serve the community I live in. The city is made up of individuals that care about making San Luis Obispo better every day. I appreciate that the city supports programs dedicated to its employees. For example, we have Slow Has, or Healthy and Smart. Slow Has is an internal organization whose mission is to steward and implement the city's organization-wide commitment to a healthy and smart culture. Another that I have the privilege of being the current president for is PACE, or Professional Association for City Employees, a nonprofit organization. PACE provides professional development, community service, and social opportunities for our employees to thrive. Through Slow Has and the city's partnership with PACE, it has allowed me to become the best version of a public service worker by promoting employee collaboration, celebrating diversity, and helping our community. So I want to take this moment to thank you, and as this wouldn't be possible without the support of city leadership. I appreciate you recognizing our great public service workers. We are here to make the community better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I'm honored to have the Benedetti family here, as well as many friends. And we have a proclamation for honoring Detective Luca Benedetti and also Detective Steve Orozco, and dedicating the freeway sign for the bridge at Buena Vista and Highway 101. So we'll go ahead and start with kind of just a little bit of information for, I guess, history of what has occurred. On May 2021, our community suffered a great loss. The death of Detective Luca Benedetti, and with the Detective Steve Orozco being shot in the line of duty. We're thankful to still have him here, of course. This month marks the 2-year anniversary of this terrible tragedy. As our community came together to support our police department and the families deeply affected by this tragedy, our elected leaders in Sacramento expressed their condolences and support for our fallen officers and the city of San Luis Obispo. State Representative Jordan Cunningham led this effort by drafting 2 resolutions, which are here before you, and were adopted and read on the floor of the state capitol. Each of these resolutions highlight the selfless service of these 2 dedicated officers and acknowledges their sacrifice for our community. A little bit about Steve Orozco. For Detective Steve Orozco, his resolution speaks to his 8 years of exemplary service as a police officer, praising his attention to duty while exemplifying the character and devotion to service, which are hallmarks of a consummate peace officer and public servant. Detective Orozco was shot, suffering significant injuries to his arm and head. The The resolution honors the bravery Detective Orozco displayed while under attack, having the courage to fight through his injuries to protect his fellow officers and community. It was therefore resolved by Assemblymember Jordan Cunningham, and I quote the resolution, that Detective Steve Orozco of the San Luis Obispo Police Department be commended for his superior record of exemplary service and leadership as a brave and dedicated law enforcement officer, and conveyed sincere best wishes for his continued recovery. For Luca Benedetti, his resolution spoke to his 13 years of exemplary service as a police officer, praising his selfless sacrifice while ensuring people throughout the state of California joined in honoring his dedicated service and sacrifice for others. He was a first-generation American born in the city of San Francisco to parents who had immigrated to the United States from Italy. Detective Luca Benedetti grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, eventually finding his way to our very own Cal Poly to study. He studied engineering before he chose to pursue his true passion, law enforcement. Detective Benedetti was exceptionally proud of his Italian heritage, which he lovingly shared with all those around him. On May 10, 2021, Detective Luca Benedetti lost his life in the line of duty, and with his passing, the state lost a dedicated public servant, and his family lost a beloved husband and father whose life of enduring purpose and goodwill will be long and respectfully remembered. It was therefore resolved by Assemblymember Jordan Cunningham that the exemplary life of Detective Luca Benedetti and his singular record of personal, professional, and community accomplishments be memorialized in perpetuity, and that his loving family members and friends be extended heartfelt sympathy. In addition, Assemblymember Cunningham introduced bipartisan legislation, thus respectfully naming the Detective Luca Benedetti Memorial Overpass. The measure designated the Buena Vista Avenue overpass at State Route 101 in the county and city of San Luis Obispo. Buena Vista Avenue is the first overpass as you enter the city, traveling south on 101. This was a familiar entry point to the city that Luca saw every day for the many years he traveled his route to work from his home. It was unanimously resolved in August 22 by the Assembly of the State of California that this fitting legislation be passed in honor of Detective Luca Benedetti and in the continuance of his legacy of selfless service to the grateful state of California. And I'd like to bring up Chief Scott to share a little bit more.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council, for this fitting recognition for our brave officers. It is an absolute honor to accept these resolutions on behalf of the families whose loved ones gave their all to protect our community on May 10th, and as always. At this time, I'd like to just recognize our honored guest here tonight, and we have the Benedetti family, Grace, Ellie, Jovi, Bino, John and Rita that are here with us, and also to recognize retired Detective Orozco, Steve Orozco, who is also here with us, and I think it is fitting to give them a big round of applause. I would also like to recognize dignitaries Jen Ford from Assemblymember Don Addis's office, and specifically former California Assemblymember Jordan Cunningham, whom I don't think will be able to join us tonight, but hopefully watch this remotely. And thanks to Assemblymember Cunningham for his thoughtful work in supporting our police professionals and the sacrifices that they make each and every day in our community. Our thanks to Senator Laird, to each of our state colleagues who unanimously supported this legislation in honor of these brave families that are here with us today. And lastly, I just want to say thank you to all those that are able to be present here tonight, those that are out working our streets or at home asleep waiting for their next shift, and for the support that they continue to give each and every one of us during this time of healing for your police department and for our community. And so my sincere thank you to each of you for being willing to recognize our staff in this way, and we will be grateful that we're honoring these legacies as such. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll be taking a quick break or a short break and be back at about 6:20, sorry. I'm reading my script wrong. And then we'll be back here in the room for the rest of the council meeting. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for enjoying a little bit of break time and spending some time with the Benedetti and Orozco families. Now we'll go ahead and move forward with our normal meeting, and we first go to the city manager report. So if the city manager will present, that would be awesome.
Happy to present the city manager report for the meeting tonight. And so we'll jump into our first slide for tonight, and just want to announce that last week, the city was awarded a funding augmentation of $225,000 for the Miosi purchase, and this will protect 1,000 acres in northern part of the Greenbelt. And so the city was awarded funding of over $3 million, but the $225,000 really is to address some of the changes in the cost valuation. So as we've been going through the due diligence, and particularly looking at the comps and working through the appraisal came back with a higher number than was allotted by the original grant. And so we were excited that the Department of Conservation and the Strategic Growth Council moved forward with the additional allocation so that we could complete the transaction. So kudos to the Natural Resources team for making this happen. This is a significant milestone for us. And so second, I just want to invite everyone to bike breakfast over at the fire department. And so as we all know, May is Bike Month across San Luis Obispo County. And so we want to invite everyone to join in the bike breakfast at the Fire Station 1 at 7 a.m. to celebrate the Bike Month. It'll be a mixture of food, but also education and awareness and safety. And as we know, there have been some safety incidents and unfortunate loss of lives. And so we want to take the opportunity to communicate with our biking community and general community about things that they can do to protect themselves, and then how to interact with drivers when they have less than stellar experiences. For other events, because there's a whole host of events happening during the month of May, you can visit rideshare.org/programs/Bike Month. And there'll be more opportunities for other bike events because there's lots of different clubs and groups that put them on. Next, I just want to do a shout out and a plug for job opportunities here at the city. So there is an opportunity for people to join the youth services team that really is comprised of a passionate and energetic group and of summer camp counselors. You can provide fun, interactive experiences for children, teach new games, lead innovative crafts, and encourage discovery. It is really kind of the fun things that happen with the city when you see kids light up with all the natural resources and things happening in and around our community. And if you're interested in making the difference in people's lives and interacting with local youth to develop leadership skills, you can apply online at slowcity.org/jobs for more information. Speaking of Parks and Recreation, we are in the middle of a lot of different recreational activities, and summer adult softball opens registration is now, and so the season starts on June 5th. You can see the link there to how to register online. The popular Summer Adult League really provides opportunity for men and co-ed divisions with lower and middle divisions to play at each league. And so you can gather your team, go play ball, and sign up and register your team online. The next slide, I just want to recognize that the city has been recognized for the city's railroad safety trail. And it was selected by the American Society of Civil Engineers, Region 9, as an outstanding bikeways and trail project for 2022 for the entire state of California. So this prestigious award recognizes projects whose primary focus is on the improvement and implementation of new bikeways, multi-use trails, both ped and bikes, and that improve community connectivity and encourage non-motorized transportation. And we know thousands of people are using that safe corridor every day to get back and from Cal Poly. And just a reminder, the Railroad Safety Trail spans 1.4 miles and links neighborhoods with major destinations in San Luis Obispo. And of course, is linked to our major city goal of climate action, sustainable transportation, and equity. And let me just correct that. We're seeing about 600 pedestrians and 400 bicycle trips per day since the opening. And so we've had thousands and thousands of trips happening. And so we're very excited to be recognized for this award. Moving to the next slide, just want to talk a little bit about the Cultural Arts and Aid Program. This year, the PCC awarded a total of $114,000 in funding through the Cultural Grants and Aid Program. And as a reminder for the public and the council, the Cultural Grants and Aid Program supports organizations that seek to improve the overall quality of life with cultural, social, and recreational activities. Funding this year was provided to 23 organizations at roughly about $4,000 per application, with a bonus of up to $1,000 based on the addition of inclusivity and sustainable practices. And so for more details and eligible requirements, you can visit www.slowcity.org/cultural GIA, and other grant funding opportunities are offered by the city. I want to just move to some of the outreach and communication efforts that will be happening with the Cultural Arts District parking structure. You may have seen today in the Tribune, there was information that was provided about the kickoff of this project. And so this week, the Cultural Arts District parking structure is beginning preparations for the phase 1 work. That includes the demolition of the vacant buildings at the site of the new parking structure and the SLO Repertory Theater. The parking lot will be closed from May 8th through May 26th to facilitate demolition work and then reopen for the public during the summer months. Adjacent neighbors were informed of the upcoming work with door hangers. Those were distributed on April 24th, really to say that on May 1st, we were going to be putting up fencing and actual construction would begin on May 8th. So we're in the process right now of developing a landing page that will be updated with project information, announcements, and across various different media platforms. And then phase 2 of is scheduled to be commenced this fall, which will begin with the removal of the parking lot and excavation of the parking structure construction. So there'll be a tremendous amount of information. And in fact, I was speaking with our parking team and our communications team. And so the council can expect at a future point a full communications plan to be provided to the council. We've gone through and looked at the next 12 months between implementing gateless technology, new prices, the removal and switch out of some infrastructure in the downtown. What else is there? I mean, there must be, I think there's something else that we're doing, but there's a lot to communicate to the public. So we have paving projects. So we've got a lot to communicate on everything that's happening in the city, but there is a specific plan with tactics and strategies. And so we'll provide that to the council so you have kind of a sense of what's coming over the next few months as we look forward to communicating about all the significant projects in the pipeline for parking. Switching gears, I just want to point this out to the City Council. It's something that I think gets lost from time to time, is that the Community Development Department does track performance through 5 key performance indicators. So you may remember way back in 2013, when I was the Community Development Director, we had Citygate come in and do an overall review of the Community Development Department. Since then, Michael and his team have developed key performance measures that look at cycle time. So essentially, what are our commitments to cycle times in terms of processing, planning, building, and engineering permits? And we've got a dashboard that we've developed. And so you can go in real time and look at different periods and see how is our performance overall and what is the percentage of projects that are meeting those cycle times. And this is part of what we report to the council on an ongoing basis. What's in store is that eventually we intend to take these key performance indicators and have them up on screens as you come into the Community Development Department, and so that people get a sense of how are we processing and how are we performing. And so I just wanted to remind both the council and the public that we have these. This has come up recently in our outreach with our economic development strategic plan. And so, as we know, that's one of the key areas that the business community pays attention to. And so it's something we've been measuring for some time. It's out there, but it seems like it got lost during COVID. So we just wanted to remind the community of that. And so with that, Madam Mayor, that ends my city manager report, and happy to answer any questions. But I just want to mention for the council, you've got a number of consent items here that are important, and we'll do this as part of the city manager's report. So there's awareness for the viewing public. We've got the minutes and resolutions. We've got a Mills Act contract at 1703 Santa Barbara Avenue. We've got a report, which is very, very helpful and instructive for the city organization about how the city is going to achieve carbon neutrality with our city facilities plan, our fleet electrification roadmap, and electric vehicle infrastructure roadmap. And then last is item 6E, which is the consideration of 2023 Human Services Grant Funding recommendations from the HRC. So with that, Madam Mayor, happy to answer any questions from you.
Thank you. Any questions from my colleagues? All right. And did you say, I apologize if I missed it, the website for the future communications about the Cultural Arts District parking garage?
I don't have that link just yet, so we'll get that out to the council. We'll imagine we're going to give you the full communications plan. We're just in the final touches of socializing that plan. In fact, I think one of the next steps will be bringing it down to downtown SLO and reviewing it with their executive director and potentially their parking and access committee. So they have an idea of what's in store. And then we'll make sure that gets socialized out there very soon via social media and other platforms, so people have a quick, easy link to see where we're at. Because if there's anything we know about construction, it's going to change.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, well, if no other questions, then we'll go ahead and move forward to the consent agenda. So, yes, one second. So what we'll do is we'll do public comment on any of the items that are not on the consent agenda, and then we'll do public comment on items that are on the consent agenda. So just because that was up on the city manager screen, so I want to make sure that was clear. So if there are any members of the community who wanted to put a public comment on, do you have one?
Yes, we have one. Fred Starbuck.
Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. I didn't know that May was Bicycle Month, so this kind of goes with my comments. And we enjoy bicycles. We live over on Tascadero Street by the lake, and we've been there for about 11 years or more. And spent almost $10,000 on bicycles, so we really enjoy using them. And it's nice to see a lot of effort in making it safe for everybody. But that's where my comment comes about the safety. It's kind of...
Sir, can you put the mic just a little bit closer?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
How about, let's see, let's rearrange this. Does this work better? I can, okay. Okay, I'll go like this. So we walk all the time over the bridge where the exit of the lake is, down to the Madonna, down to the shopping area and stuff, and the beautiful park there and all. And we really enjoy that. But, and I've talked to a lot of people, talked to people in the city that design these walkways and so forth and so on. They've been very easy to work with and talk about and get information from. But when you combine the bicycles with people, with pedestrians, it's just not a good mix. And I would propose or put forward that anytime there's only a walkway, it's a sidewalk. And if you put a bicycle on the sidewalk, it's just a bad mix. We've had many close calls, and we've learned to walk along like this and look regularly over behind us, because bicycles are high-speed, silent vehicles, and they come on you like that. On April 11th last month, we were enjoying looking at the outflow of the lake at the bridge there, and as we always do, my wife turned to look to clear the way to walk out, and a bicycle comes, boom, right by her, less than 6 inches away. And it just gave her, she just was just shocked. And she said, doggone it, if I get hit, I'm gonna sue somebody. Where's the liability come? It's just a bad mix. I would put forward to the thought of, not everyone can ride a bike, not everyone wants to ride a bike. How about people that are somewhat infirmed, have to use a walker? Use that as, is this a safe place for somebody with a walker to go along with high-speed bicycles that are silent, and they'll come on you in a heartbeat. Only about half the people are really cautious. The other half just don't much care. And we have had many close calls. The one on 11th was the closest and was really a start. And I thought she put it pretty, the bottom line. I worked with the Department of Defense and aircraft safety for 30 years. And there's a phrase that they use, an accident waiting to happen by design. And you look at that, and that's, I'm afraid, what I have to say about that. So have people look at it, see what you can do to mitigate that. I'd appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Any other comment?
No, they're not.
Okay. Would you like to comment on the commenter?
Madam Mayor and members of the council, thank you for the comments. And we're giving some thought to this. I've had some recent conversations with our active transportation staff about what we can be doing to communicate that safety is a responsibility for everyone in every mode. Whether you're a pedestrian, a cyclist, or a driver, we all have shared responsibility. And I've actually had some preliminary conversations with some Cal Poly faculty about what can we be doing as a city to engender respect for all modes while we're out on the roadway. And so we do have some short-term communications you'll see rolling out over the next couple months as we ask for everyone's patience while there's construction and as people continue to become more used and experience some of the new facilities that we're building in San Luis Obispo. But longer term, we know we need to make some headway with everyone to make sure, whether you're on a bike or in a car, that we are respecting the sanctity of life and people's safety as we're using the roadways. And I think we can do that. I think that San Luis Obispo can be a leader, and I think that there's some smart people that we can bring to the table to make sure this happens. The roadway facility on Madonna is no different than the multi-use trails that we have on the bicycle safety trail. We have decades of demonstrated experience of people walking and biking on trails together. And so we'll certainly be looking for ideas of what we can do to make sure and remind everyone that, give everyone the safe space and recognize that we all have responsibility to be safe out there.
Thank you. In my head was the little bell ringing from when people are coming up on the bike safety trail, and I often walk it and hear that little noise going, okay, I've got to move over. And I also know that we were talking quite a bit at the Earth Day around how do we help with bike education and hear more about that for people who are driving a car, riding a bike, or walking. Because if the cyclist knows exactly what to do and what movements to do with their arms, if the person next to them doesn't know, it doesn't do any good. So just really that we need to have more education holistically. So thank you very much. Do you have something else?
Yeah, I did want to just share with the council. So I had friends from the internet help me out here about the website is up and running on the Cultural Arts District parking structure. So it's www.slowcity.org /cultural arts parking. And you can find all the information, includes the schedule, the phases, information, links to all the studies and reports. And so we'll be updating that in real time.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, next we have the consent agenda. And are there any commenters on the consent agenda?
Yes, we have one for item 6E.
Okay, great, good to know. And do we have any items that would like to be pulled from my colleagues? Vice Mayor.
No, I just had a comment on 6C as well.
Okay, if no items are being pulled, then let's go ahead and do public comment.
I'm sorry,
Oh,
I
you do
did
have
want to say that on 6E, I want to disclose that my husband's a volunteer chair of the board of City Farm SLO, which is receiving, which is proposed to receive a grant. But I don't feel that that I need to step down on that basis, but I just wanted to disclose that connection. So thank you.
Thank you for disclosing that, that's helpful.
Garrett Olson?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council, esteemed city leadership friends. Garrett Olson, I'm a city resident and the CEO of the SLO Food Bank. And here on behalf of the SLO Food Bank, and more importantly on behalf of the over 31,500 SLO County residents that we compassionately and nutritiously serve every month, to express our support and appreciation for the funding on item 6E. Among the many transformational and wonderful things that funding is going to do, it's going to provide some partial funding for our No Cook Bag, which is an amazing program where we provide nutritious food and dignity to our unhoused residents. And I'm so thankful that our two progressive public safety chiefs are here with us as well, because our No Cook Bag is a really important partnership between the SLO Food Bank and the city. The police department CAT team and the Fire Department Mobile Crisis Unit, both are partners in providing No Cook Bags to our unhoused residents, and it has become the peace offering, the olive branch, in oftentimes difficult situations when our public safety officers and field mental health providers need to establish a trusting relationship with somebody who may be having crisis, may be behaving or presenting in a way that needs to be addressed, and to be able to start that relationship with the offering of nutritious food is a beautiful way to start off a trusting relationship and engage in that conversation. Not surprisingly, our No Cook Bags are actually one of our most expensive commodities. It's very difficult to find open and eat food that isn't high in salt or fat or sugar, but most predominantly salt. In 2022, the SLO Food Bank provided over $84,000 worth of No Cook Bags to the various organizations in the city of San Luis Obispo that provide that service to our unhoused residents. And we continue to see an escalation, not so much in the pit count, but in the utilization of No Cook Bags that is exacerbating our homeless count, moving at a rate much faster than that. We're honored to be there. We know that every time we're providing a No Cook Bag, we're saving somebody the loss of dignity of asking others for food, or worse yet, getting food out of trash receptacles. And so we're thankful for this partnership. We hope to continue the dialogue with the city as this has become a staple component of the city program, and see if we couldn't figure out a way to have more sustainable funding for this program in partnership with you. So thank you so much. Thank you for not pulling the item. We are truly appreciative of the support and the leadership in this community.
Thank you so much. And I do miss the bok choy outfit. So next time. Any,
Next time.
okay. Any other commenters?
No, we do not.
Okay. All right, without any other discussion, do we have someone who'd like to make a motion? Vice Mayor?
Yes, and I just wanted to say on 6C that I'm thrilled that local residents have saved the establishment, which we're referring to as the Call Hotel here, and they're going to be investing in bringing it back to its former glory. So yes, I would like to move the consent agenda.
Thank you, I agree. Councilmember Shoresman?
I'll go ahead and second, but I also want to take a second to say thank you to the Human Relations Commission for doing a very thoughtful and thorough job with the grant recommendations in item 6C. I know that's a lot of work, and had a long discussion with our DEI manager about the process. So thank you for all the work.
Thank you. Can we have
comment too?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I just want to give a shout out to my nerded out on the carbon neutral city facilities, fleet, et cetera. It's really impressive work, and just so thoughtfully done, and you know, understandable and detailed, and really gives us a great foot forward. So thank you to that.
Absolutely, and I also appreciated that there was a little explanation around how we can do all electric voluntarily for our buildings, even though we're not requiring anyone else in the community to do that. So thank you for including that. And also I wanted to also include my heartfelt thank you to the HRC. I know it's a massive amount of work to go through all the grants, and thank you very much. Can we have roll call?
Vice Mayor Marks? Yes.
Councilmember Shoresman?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And now we are moving up a public hearing item. No, we are not. We are, okay. Public hearing and business item 8A to introduce two ordinances amending the zoning map and amending municipal code, chapter 9.10 for the cannabis business program. I'll let staff get a little organized before we get started.
All right, well, thank you, Mayor Stewart and members of the council. Alex Fuchs is our cannabis business coordinator, and we'll go ahead and give the presentation.
Hello. Thank you, Michael. Madam Mayor, members of council. At the last annual cannabis program update in March, staff discussed a return to council in May at this meeting to propose an expansion of the cannabis business overlay zones to include some recently annexed areas of the city. Staff is also taking this as an opportunity to make some minor amendments and updates to the cannabis program with the anticipation of opening for new application periods sometime in the summer to hopefully fill that third and final retail storefront permit. So there's 3 recommendations before you tonight. Hopefully, if I'm allowed, I can paraphrase these just to make it a little bit more clear for the general audience. But the initial recommendation is to introduce an ordinance amending the city's zoning map to expand the cannabis business overlay zones to include 2 annexed areas of the city, to introduce a draft ordinance amending the cannabis regulations of the city, adding requirements for property owners that lease real property to cannabis businesses, and then adopt a resolution updating the merit ranking criteria used by evaluators to score, and in the case of retail storefronts and cultivation, rank those applications. So the presentation will go through the cannabis business zone expansion, the existing cannabis business overlay zones, how they were established, and the criteria that staff used to determine what areas of the city should be designated. The brief discussion about the two expansion areas, Fierro Lane and East Airport area, and then the cannabis business permit types that are allowed in the each land use that is contained within the two expansion areas. Also discuss the municipal code amendments, adding requirements for property owners, and then a brief discussion of the merit criteria that staff is recommending be updated for all permit types. So the existing cannabis business overlay zones were established in 2018. There are 7 areas of the city shown in green on this map. Staff determined appropriate areas based on land use types, the buffers that are required for a certain permit, not all cannabis permits, as well as buffers that were established and adopted by City Council. And then also for retail storefronts, properties that front arterial streets, such as Higuera Street, Broad Street, Tank Farm. And so this is so far a little bit of a recap of the discussion back in March. So this is just a map showing the location of the 2 proposed expansion areas in relation to the airport. One is just north of it on the west side of Broad Street, and one is across from it, opposite Broad Street. Both of them are within the airport area specific plan. So the first area, Fierro Lane, Clarion Court, was annexed in November 2019. It is comprised of about 39 acres, totaling 30 parcels with about 500,000 square feet of total building area. There's 3 primary buildable zones that make up the area: service, commercial, manufacturing, and business park. And as I said on the last slide, it's located within the airport area specific plan. The East Airport area was annexed several months later in March 2020. It's comprised of 2 development areas, the East Airport Commerce Park Association and the Senglick development that sort of occupies the north end of the East Airport area. It constitutes about 58 acres amongst 33 parcels. It's zoned service commercial throughout, and it does have several properties that front an arterial street along Broad, as you can see in the sort of west side of the crosshatched area. So the cannabis activities that the city permits include cultivation, nursery, manufacturing, distribution, of course, retail, which includes both delivery and storefronts, as well as testing laboratories, and micro businesses, which are essentially a combination of multiple permit types. So it can be cultivation and storefront, it could be cultivation and delivery, things of those nature. The yellow square shows the 3 land use types that make up the 2 proposed annexation areas. So service, commercial, manufacturing, and business park. And as you can see, all 3 of these areas pretty much allow for any commercial permit type to be issued with varying levels of approval. The Fierro Lane Clarion Court area, even though it contains service commercial, would not technically qualify for permitting of retail storefronts. And that's just because those service commercial parcels don't front an arterial street. So there is some limitation there that's just not obvious when you look at the table. The municipal code amendments that staff are recommending tonight is just a minor follow-up to the updates that occurred in October of 2022. At that council meeting, staff proposed and council adopted additional language clarifying the application and approval and permit obtainment and suspension or revocation requirements that the city has for commercial cannabis operators, but it didn't include any requirements for property owners that lease real property to cannabis businesses. So there is a minor amendment to additional phrases being proposed to be added to this section 9.10.070, basically stating that anybody that is listed as a property owner of record on the application is also subject to the disqualifying criteria, same as the applicants and primary principals that are also listed on the application. And the intent here is to limit opportunities for individuals that have any sort of general or remote interests within our cannabis program from from benefiting in a way that we feel it represents either the industry, the city, or the program in a negative light, primarily through disqualifying criminal convictions. So if it is approved, what would be required is if an applicant got to the stage of being issued a contingent operator permit, and we move to conducting background checks, the property owner of record that's listed on the application would also have to submit and meet the requirements for the background check clearance. If council or the audience want to see the specific language that staff is proposing, then attachment B, Exhibit A, has the legislative draft. And then lastly, staff is recommending updates to the merit criteria that are used to score, and in the case of retail storefronts and cultivation, rank applications, since those have a limited number available. There were some updates to retail storefronts in October 2022, but these updates would qualify for all permit types, not just retail storefronts. So section 1, community benefit section, staff is proposing some changes here to basically clarify that applicants can score 0 on certain criteria, including employment of under 60% of individuals that live within the county. Also scoring 0 for under 50% of either supplies and equipment being sourced locally, which is identified as within 90 miles of the project site. And then also scoring 0 points if they commit to fewer than 10 community service hours per month. As it's currently written, it just states 5 or 10, but there is an opportunity for a third that's sort of implicit, but staff wants to make it clear that that is an option. Under equity and labor, similar scenario where staff is just clarifying that applications that include 0 primary principals that are at or below the median income level can receive 0 points. And then of course, at the bottom one, 2A3, that when the city references minimum wage, it's referencing the state of California minimum wage, so there's no confusion there. In section 3, these recommendations were kind of based off of some council discussion that occurred back in October when the retail storefront updates came forward. I believe some of the comments were about prioritizing infill development and rehabilitation of existing sites as opposed to awarding more points for the development of raw land. So staff is proposing combining those two sections, 3A2 and 3A3, into a single criterion where the applicant could get a potential of up to 10 points for doing either infill development or development of raw land or both, so that they're prioritized equally. And then there's also discussion about why points are awarded for meeting the on-site parking requirements, which is already required by the city's development review process. So staff is just recommending eliminating that altogether. And then the last one at the bottom, there is a points awarded for retail storefronts and cultivation for committing to maintaining a medicinal cannabis cultivation license, and that's a state license, not a local license. And right now it says 0 to 10, but staff just wants to clarify that it's an either or, because they either commit to maintaining the license or they don't. So that concludes the presentation. Again, the recommendations are to introduce an ordinance, expanding the cannabis business overlay zones, introduce an ordinance, adopting the minor language clarifications for property owners, and then adopt a resolution updating the merit criteria for all permit types.
Thank you very much. And just wanted to go back to the merit criteria. The one right before that. Yeah. So was there concerns that people were, instead of having 0, like 2.8.1, instead of going to 0, that people were hoping for like 1, 2, and 3 points? Is that why there needed to be that clarification?
Yeah, it just wasn't clear to applicants, and then we want to make it clear to the reviewers as well that it's either 0 or 4 or 8, that there's no variation within there. And it just helps with discrepancies, and it helps when people go to apply. They can kind of better calculate on their end what the potential points that they may be awarded before it's reviewed.
Okay, it
Yeah.
seemed obvious you're either getting 4 or 8, but I appreciate the extra clarification. Thank you so much. Any questions from my colleagues? Okay, I think it's public comment time.
None.
Wow.
None.
None. Okay, so no public comment. Any thoughts? Councilmember Pease, I see you're thinking about it. Councilmember Schwarzman.
Thank you for the report. Actually, some of the questions that I was going to ask, you answered through your well-done presentation, so that's always appreciated. I guess I would just say that you clearly heard the conversation that we had on the dais before, and that's always appreciated with the suggestions and the changes that you've made. I appreciate the clarifications on the scoring sheets. To the mayor's point about, I just think that it's clearer when you know exactly how many points you're going to get for each area. It takes some of the potential subjectivity out of it for the reviewers. I think if it's clear that you get this many points if you have, if you've done this, then this many if you've done that, and so you don't have people that might fudge, 2 or 3 points here or there. So anyway, I think that just clarifies things a lot better. I also appreciate the change. I guess I'll look to Councilmember Pease a little bit because I think she was the one that talked about the difference between, updating or utilizing raw land versus, cleaning or using infill, making infill spaces nicer. But it seems like the way that you did it captures the need and removed by having it in 2 different bullet points before it you could only qualify for one or the other. So it changed the denominator wouldn't show. I'm not explaining this very well, but it makes it so one or the other. If you're doing one or the other, it doesn't take away from the total denominator of points that you would get, if that makes sense. So anyway, those are the comments that I had, and it looks cleaner and better, and I'm prepared to support it.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Pease.
Yeah, exactly. All those comments, and I do appreciate how it came together and picked up on the comments, so I'll support it as well. If there's no other, I'll go ahead and move staff recommendation.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Marks.
Yeah, well, I also support this, and I'm glad to see that the clarification has taken place, and also that some, I had spoken earlier with our city attorney and understood that we not only made more clear, but also more accountable how we're dealing with the cannabis industry here in our city. I'm glad to see the community service points still being there, and I have to say that I'm familiar with the one that Megan's Organic Market has done at City Farm, which is a food forest. It's an orchard of fruit that's going to be available to the food bank and other people, and they're out there pruning and things like that. So anyway, I feel good about it, and I think that giving the annexation areas the opportunity, we don't know if this will actually materialize, but I think it's just fair to allow the annexed areas to have a chance if somebody wants to come forward and do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Francis.
I was going to go ahead and second. I was on the other side of the room last time this came up in front of council, and I really appreciate how clear and concise this presentation was. Thank you.
Thank you. In the light of not dittoing all of my colleague members, I'll go ahead and call for roll call.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Schwarzman?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, and the motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much for the thorough detail. We appreciate it. Okay, so we go from cannabis to a study session for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program Update and Strategic Plan Framework. And with us, we will have Nestor Veloz Pasalagua, our new DEI manager, and he'll be sharing with us about the major city goals and more.
Thanks, Mayor. And I will just kick things off really quickly while Nestor puts the presentation up on the screen for everyone. So thank you for being here tonight. And I'm pleased to be joined by our new DEI manager, Nestor Velos Pasalacqua, who has been in his position for about 3 months total at this point, but is already having an impact, including his work on bringing this item forward tonight. Just a reminder to the council, this is a study session only. We're not looking for any final action tonight. We want to do two things. One is just to give you an update and a rundown of the accomplishments of the DEI program, and then use that as a spring form to talk about the DEI strategic plan. It is the last remaining high priority task originally identified by the DEI task force formed by the city. The framework is greatly informed by all the work that we've done today, including the DEI task force recommendations, the internal DEI audit that we've been able to do, and all of the different tasks we've been able to complete as a part of the major city goal over the last 2 years. And what we're hoping to get feedback on from the council tonight is really just the high level framework of that strategic plan. And so there's a vision statement that we've developed. It's based heavily on the vision statement that the DEI task force used. The vision statement obviously guides the implementation of a strategic plan. We've identified 4 key pillars. Those are effectively the focus areas of the strategic plan, and then supporting objectives as well. Ultimately, if the council is comfortable with the vision, pillars, and those supporting objectives, we'll then go back out to the community and do a lot of community engagement on all of those pieces, but more specifically, what are the tasks that we can implement that will help support all of those different objectives, the pillars, and ultimately the vision of the strategic plan, and then return back to council for final approval. And it looks like we are up and ready to go. And with that, I'm happy to hand it over to Nestor.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon or good evening, Mayor Stewart and members of the council. As the recommendation for today's study session is to, 1, hold a study session to receive an update on the implementation of the diversity, equity, and inclusion Mayor City Goal, and provide direction on the development of the city's DEI strategic plan. Before we move through this presentation, the Office of DEI want to acknowledge the service and collaboration received from community members, partners, interest groups, and also acknowledging City Council for establishing DEI as a major city goal. We also want to acknowledge the previous DEI manager, Dr. Bea Makekau, and the DEI task force, which play an integral role in laying the foundation for DEI. Personally, I'd like to recognize the recommendations developed by the DEI task force, the DEI internal report, and the continued support and drive from the DEI employee committee. Their collaboration has been integral for us to be able to build the foundations of DEI. So what's in the menu for tonight? The agenda on tonight's study session includes a brief background on the DEI timeline, the work accomplished so far. We will then cover the DEI strategic plan framework, then the initiatives for public engagement that will take place in fall of 2023. The study session will conclude with focused questions for City Council. City Council has continued to make DEI a key priority for the city. As pointed out in the current timeline, the city has worked and accomplished various initiatives. From September 2020 to January 2021, the DEI task force was created and convened. Then the DEI internal audit report and the DEI internal employee committee took place. These 3 initiatives, again, are at the core of what we call the foundation. Under oversight of the DEI task force, the first round of DEI high impact grants took place as well, with a total request of $640,000 and 28 applications received. A total of $109,800 were allocated to 9 recipients. Following that, the DEI task force recommendations included making DEI a major city goal, and in fiscal year 21-23, City Council adopted diversity, equity, and inclusion as a major city goal. I want to go ahead and pause at this moment because I do want to recognize that there has been a lot of work that has been accomplished by the office since its inception. So I want to say thank you so very much for your support. By February of 2022, various important steps took place as well. The Office of DEI was created, and the first DEI manager was hired. The Human Relations Commission moved to receive support from the Office of DEI, and an MOU was executed with Cal Poly to continue to expand the learning opportunities in the community. The first round of Human Services grant also took place. Previously known, the Grants in Aid, and the name was changed and adopted by you. In February of 2023, we are now in the process of furthering such strategies with, for example, Cal Poly, by allocating funding that will help us expand and enhance tangible learning opportunities and creating learning environments. That will help us actually move forward with creating a multicultural learning programming in the community, as well as development of internal strategies to create a safe and welcoming work environment for all staff, among different interventions that we will continue to move forward with. As you will see in this slide, for fiscal year 23-24, the Office of DEI will continue to align with key objectives that create and sustain transformational change in the community and within the organization. These practices include, for example, the continued support to the Human Relations Commission on grant review. Currently, the HRC oversees the DEI high impact grants, the Human Services grants, and next month you will also see the DEI Slow Business Grant Program coming. Another key task, as I mentioned before, is the multicultural programming strategy, which is done in collaboration with Cal Poly. The aim is to create learning sessions throughout the entire city where all individuals, again, feel safe, there is a sense of belonging, and where dialogue and learning takes place. Following this, we have the DEI strategic plan. The first step is for us to present to you today the draft DEI strategic plan framework that will help us lay the foundation for the upcoming plan. Another key objective is our now extended collaboration and partnership, the Diversity Partner Network, which is hosted and led by Cal Poly, where we meet on a monthly basis and we engage in opportunities to learn from one another and to leverage resources and continue to innovate and apply DEI practices in the community in our job settings as well. And internally, there are learning activities that are being currently designed to help the city departments engage in DEI practices and to be exposed to new learning concepts. As you can see, although these strategies and interventions may seem separate, they all relate to one another. From grants to programming to trainings to partnerships, the work of DEI is embedded and it is practical. And we will continue to make that a key relevant aspect of DEI here at the city. Now, this slide provides a quick overview of what the draft framework contains. The framework is broken into sections, highlighting each of the key pillars. Each pillar includes a main goal, supporting objectives, and illustrative examples. I do want to make the note that those examples are not exhaustive. They are basically just examples at this point, and we welcome your feedback. This framework is intended to be focused and actionable and expands for 5 years. The 5-year timeline is intentionally established so we can evaluate and conduct some adaptability studies and make some changes based on the needs of the community. While our initial 5-year plan aims to encompass the city's approach to implementing DEI, other priorities and tasks will be included in future updates. That way we can create a strategic plan that meets the community's needs as well as the changes that are happening internally in the organization. Since this is the city's first DEI strategic plan framework and our focus in these first 5 years is to continue to create spaces for collaboration and to establish baseline data. I want to reassure you that we intend to collect, and we will collect, quantitative and qualitative data to best understand the impact of our strategies. So that way we are informed and we know what changes needs to be made in the future. An assigned task within the fiscal year 21-23 in the DEI work plan was to develop the DEI strategic plan. And such plan should include the recommendations and feedback obtained from key stakeholders and documents, such as the DEI task force recommendations and the DEI internal audit report. This also includes the work developed as part of the collaborative process with city departments and the internal DEI committee, lessons learned from the implementation or the work that we have accomplished thus far, and feedback from community partners. We will incorporate council's comments and feedback on the draft DEI strategic plan framework and propose public engagement into the development of the final DEI strategic plan. This diagram conveys and at least tries to simplify the complexity of compiling such recommendations and feedback from the aforementioned documents and provides an overarching approach to the application of DEI in two areas. One is being the internal transformational work within the organization, and two, the community-facing collaboration and partnerships to strengthen and expand DEI practices. As a point of reference, I want to highlight that all of these components or pillars take place concurrently and simultaneously. They do not happen in a vacuum. They feed off each other and reinforce each other, thus creating a narrative and a day-to-day operations that align with the city's values and furthers the application of DEI in all the different city departments. Nonetheless, this approach is also adaptable to changes and to the needs of the community. I want to make sure that those components are live pillars that we can use to learn and to create new initiatives that are meaningful to the community and to the city. To begin with, the draft DEI strategic plan framework aligns with Council's vision statement. And this is done for consistency, ensures alignment, and this is the driver to embed DEI. The City Council vision statement, as you know, reads, the City of San Luis Obispo is a dynamic community, embracing its future while respecting its past, with core values of civility, sustainability, inclusivity, regionalism, partnership, and resiliency. The draft DEI vision statement reads, we envision a San Luis Obispo that is welcoming, inclusive, and safe. Our city values diversity, promotes equity and belonging, actively denounces systemic racism, and believe that both in value and practice, San Luis Obispo can be a place where all members, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexuality, religion, or ability, are respected, are represented, respected, valued, and heard. The draft, the expectations, which aligns with the general major city goal, provide consistency and create a broad application under DEI. These expectations include development and implementation of strategies, programs, and policies that build a workplace culture and community of inclusion, fairness, and belonging for all, involved underserved and underrepresented communities, and diverse voices in program development and delivery to ensure current lived experiences drive understanding, priorities, and efforts. Partner with proven community providers and utilize best practice and innovative models to leverage city resources and maximize effectiveness and impacts of initiatives. And lastly, identify and track measurable results as the city continues to progress in maturing diversity and inclusion. So now we are going to be moving into this slide, and the next 3 slides will go over each of the pillars. And again, it will cover supportive objectives, the illustrative examples, which again, they are not exhaustive. And again, we're hoping to receive your feedback. The first pillar is the organizational culture and structure. The goal reads, enhance and promote an organization driven by transformational change that encourages exposure to education and training opportunities, that reinforce efforts toward a diverse work environment, that fosters a place of belonging for all city employees, and creates an engaged system for employment development and community engagement. The 4 supporting objectives under this pillar include transformational governance, embed DEI education and training practices, enhance work environment, and enhance career and employment experience. We've outlined several illustrative examples, which again are not exhaustive, and they are described in a bit more detail in the draft document that you have received. Some of these examples include, for example, the development of an approval of a DEI statement, or the development of a language guide to support staff engagement internally and with the community, ongoing baseline trainings and resources for staff and the community to engage in DEI practices, the development of internal review tools to determine success on how effective our trainings and resources are, staff assessments and focus groups to identify training priorities, and staff-led DEI workshops that focus on departmental needs. The next pillar is communications. Our goal is to develop compelling internal and external DEI messaging, either verbal, written, nonverbal, or visual, that encourages dialogue and fosters a sense of belonging among staff and the community members. The supporting objectives under this pillar include strengthen transparency and trust for all communities, engage in DEI branding, and develop and implement language standards and narrative reinforcement. Again, we've outlined different illustrative examples in the document that was provided to you, but some of these examples include, for example, the consistent and regular DEI messaging within the city organization. Another example would be transparent communication on internal efforts to the community. Consistently update DEI webpage, the internal webpage that we currently host for our staff, as well as the one that is public facing, to ensure that we are providing the most updated information on the work that we're doing. And support the communications program in the public and in the PEN manual training and implementation, which is an item that you'll be reviewing later today as well. The next pillar is community development and support. The supporting objective outlined under, supporting goal reads, reinforce and expand community partners' diversity, equity, and inclusion programming that foster a welcoming community-wide environment and a stronger sense of belonging for all, consistent with the city's engagement and commitment to DEI. The supporting objectives outlined in this pillar include developed and established multicultural programming, promote awareness and inclusion, and increase visibility and representation. Some of the illustrative examples include community learning and educational sessions that are meaningful and reflect the priorities of various communities, reinforce learning spaces that create participation among attendees and partners. Another example is the continued connection and relationship building between partners in order to leverage learning opportunities between each other. The last pillar is adaptability and sustainability. Our goal is to welcome and embed new concepts, perspectives, practices, and lessons learned driven by local communities and the city's needs to best navigate long-term transformational change and continue to support further implementation of DEI strategies and initiatives. Some of the supportive objectives include invest and sustain in innovative grant activities and review metrics and conduct data analysis. Some of the illustrative examples include consistent and intentional support to community partners in their efforts to embed DEI in the community. Another example would be the evaluation of grant programs and recommend changes to ensure the greatest community impact. Another item or example would be foster cross-collaboration between nonprofits and businesses to create engaging programs and partnerships in the community to leverage resources and create long-term change. And another example would be create outcomes and measures and metrics and use such data to best find solutions that are consistent with the needs of the entire community. That concludes the 4 pillars. We also have public engagement. This slide will go over our public engagement. As you already know, public engagement is the driver to ensure that our plan has been given careful consideration and participation from the community. And that includes feedback and application from a community lens. Following the public engagement and noticing manual strategy, the public engagement strategy will align with their inform, consult, and collaborate expectations and guidelines identified in the paying manual, which is an agenda item that you will review today. Upon receiving your feedback, the Office of DEI will participate in various public engagement activities in the community. That will include outreach and engagement of community partners. Currently, the Office of DEI has a good standing relationship with various community organizations, and their participation is critical. You may be wondering what kind of groups would be those that we'll be reaching out to. They will include, for example, and again, this list is not exhaustive, nonprofit organizations focus on providing social services and expanding DEI initiatives in the community. Residents of the city of San Luis Obispo, property owners, business owners, elected officials, commissioners, civic leaders, school district representatives, and other interested groups as well. Another strategy under public engagement will be the Office of DEI will provide a survey to the community at large and will conduct group interviews with representatives of diverse local entities and organizations to gather additional feedback. And following that, the Office of DEI will conduct a DEI public workshop to receive feedback on the strategic plan that will help basically shape some of the strategies and tasks to ensure successful implementation. That concludes our high-level review of the draft DEI strategic plan framework, and I would like now to direct your attention to the 4 focus questions, which Deputy City Manager Greg Herman will go over.
Thank you, Nestor. Hello. Okay, thank you. So this is the study session portion of the presentation. We've got focus questions for council. We know that's a lot of information, so this is just a template that council can use to sort of have the discussion and deliberation portion of the item, or if there's other items, or if there's other ways that the council would like to have the discussion, that's perfectly fine as well. We thought we'd start really with the DEI vision statement. Again, that was based upon a lot of work that was done with the DEI task force, then updated based upon what we've learned over the last 2 years. We don't have to do group wordsmithing tonight. Sorry to disappoint any of you who might have been expecting that, but any sort of general feedback, we'll refine that. And we'll also use that vision and statement as a part of our public engagement. If we get really great ideas, good feedback, consensus on certain pieces that weren't brought up this evening, you can expect that to come back to you all as a part of the final DEI strategic plan. Next, moving on to the 4 pillars, so sort of moving down the funnel, are those 4 pillars the appropriate focus areas? Is that where you would like us to spend our time in terms of further fleshing out details of what the strategic plan is going to look like? And then really the supporting objectives. Do they make sense when you look at each of those 4 pillars individually? Do they accomplish what you would want us to do within each of those? If there's thoughts or ideas in terms of examples or specific tasks or tactics that you'd like us to accomplish, we welcome that feedback. But really that's what we're hoping to engage the public on in terms of what's the meaningful actions that we can take to be able to accomplish those higher level goals, deliver on the pillars, and ultimately the vision from the plan. So we will end on the recommendation slide for this evening, but we're happy to flip back to the focus questions and help facilitate that with the council.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you for the huge presentation, chock full of lots of information that I'm sure took weeks and weeks to come together with. I just have 2 questions first before we get into the whole study. There was, in the beginning, there was a part that kind of says, regardless of ethnicity, a whole list of things. Can you go back to that page? Maybe too far. I'll ask the question while you're finding it. So there was a sentence in the sentence that gender identity. It did not say expression. I was just curious if there was a reason, or would we be adding that back in? And then I have one more question I'll come back to you on.
To the vision statement.
I'm not sure. Is it where it was the vision statement? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Yes, it was the DEI vision statement. Thank you. So I just wondered if between, yeah, you get.
Yes, so definitely that is a working DEI vision statement at this point, and it will be revised to ensure that the language it is and provides inclusivity for all the different, not only protected classes, but the many different ways in which identities are being represented. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. I know there's so much to fit into one little section. And I guess the other part of this question is really the first sentence is genuinely the vision statement. It's almost as though you're expanding on it below it, right? And you can keep that lit if you want.
Yes, you are correct. I do want to point out the current DEI vision statement was partly created from the DEI task force recommendation. And yes, you're completely correct about the first portion of the DEI vision statement.
Thank you. And then there was one thing, it says 1B, embedding DEI, I think a couple slides down. And I didn't know if it was embedding, there we go, embedding DEI in education training practices in something specific or just in general in all things city. I didn't know if there was any conversation around that.
Thank you for asking that question. The supporting objective of embed DEI education and training practices, some of the components or examples that fall within that include, for example, cultural awareness trainings, working to develop a DEI, working with the DEI internal committee and the department leadership to be able to engage in specific training topics, and then update and provide resources using the internal DEI website. So the embedding part is about really including not only training practices and education to the staff internally, but in the way that we think about operationalizing DEI in the day-to-day when we come to work.
Okay, thank you so much for those clarifications. Councilmember Francis.
Actually wanted to just pop in because we were on this slide. I had a question about here. I like, and I think I get the use of the word enhance here when we're talking about the work environment and career and employment experience. But as I was looking down into the illustrative examples, I imagine when we're talking about enhancing, we're talking about bringing in more resources, better experiences, better internal review. I wondered though if enhance is enough, if we need to be a little bit more descriptive about what we're actually doing with the work environment and with the career and employment experience. And I know we're not wordsmithing tonight, but I just kind of wanted to throw out there that I had to kind of read that and then go back and kind of identify, oh, this is what I think they mean by enhance, but it wasn't initially clear to me there. So I'm just going to throw that out. Maybe a few more words rather than changing it, because I actually like the use of enhance there. And then jumping ahead, and I think actually this is kind of throughout, there's the reference to metric and data analysis. And I was trying to formulate my question as I was leading up to this, because it's not actually a question so much yet as sort of just a note that these are really challenging things to monitor and to collect data on, particularly since in this we don't actually know what are we collecting data on except for city demographic data and staff demographic data and that kind of stuff. But I guess I would love to see a little bit more development on what we're going to be collecting data on, what we hope to measure with that, what are the goals with collecting that data, and then how do we go forth with analyzing it. And all of that is expressed there, that it says that there will be analysis, but getting a little bit more in the weeds on what that looks like. And then my last bit here, are we kind of jumping around? Is that okay? Okay. Under adaptability and sustainability, I think this gets into kind of the squishy world again a little bit, but there's the phrase long-term transformational change, which I really liked. And there's implied in that is that we're going to kind of continue to look for best practices and respond to the world as it changes. But then looking down into the examples and then how we actually institute that, I didn't see that in the illustrative examples. It was very much more internal. And I was hoping for maybe a little bit more external, like, are we in line with where the world is and where we should be? And I don't know if I described that well, but that was just my thought reading through there. Thanks.
Thank you so very much for bringing those points. I completely agree with you. So in the development of these framework, a lot of the work was consistent in reviewing the recommendations of the DI task force and the DI internal audit report. And we, the office had really tried to pull together that comprehensive list of recommendations. And in doing so, I think we might have overlooked some of those larger components in the ultimate impact in the community. While we're focusing heavily on understanding what's happening organizationally, we want to make sure that the impact that we're doing internally truly reflects the work and the changes that are happening in the community. So thank you. And then we'll make sure that that language and those applications are being added in there.
Okay. One other point just to note on that is that I think the grant program is one of the most valuable tools that we have. And I think there's some, at least, thought that I had about where does a grant program fit in amongst these 4 different pillars. And I think that it fell here because I think it is our tool to be able to leverage the capacity and expertise of the community to be able to continue the work forward far beyond the resources that we have here at the city. And so I think the grant program being embedded under adaptability and particularly sustainability of DEI efforts is our effort to make sure that out in the community that this is continuing forward. And we're grateful that we have ongoing funding for that grant program. And one of the things we'll be looking at is saying, if we had really successful DEI business grants, should we potentially look at taking some of the funding that we currently have allocated for the high impact business grant and have some of that available for for-profit businesses in additional to the nonprofit groups that currently receive that funding. So I think that's our tool to sort of be accountable as the community changes around us, to be able to make sure that we're using those resources in the best way and leveraging the capacity that the community has.
Councilmember Shorsman.
Yeah, I'm going to drill down on Councilmember Francis's question a little bit more related to the data. I know it's just an illustrative example under metrics and conduct data analysis to create outcome measures and metrics consistent with the development and implementation of the DEI strategic plan. And as she pointed out, this is a really hard area to get concrete, especially outcome data on the activities that we've conducted to measure success. But I wonder if, just as a little teaser or preview, if you had any ideas so far on the types of data elements that you would be looking for.
Thank you for that question. So in my background as DEI and the work that I have conducted before in different organizations, usually what it comes down to is to understand the lived experience of the individual. So a lot of it actually tends to be anecdotal data. But how can we make sure that that information is truly conveyed to the community in a manner that is digestible, but is also meaningful and that can create change within the organization? So one of those items that I look when I think about metrics and outcomes is about understanding, one, the impact of the different services that we provide as a city, whether it is for grants, but also looking at how the lived experience has changed because of the support that the city has provided through grants or different training opportunities out in the community. Additionally to that, for example, once we move forward with the DEI multicultural programming with Cal Poly, we will be assessing and understanding which particular engagement processes, whether they may look like educational workshops or panel discussions, truly have a more impactful way of truly implementing DEI. And if that requires looking into some quantitative data from one to asking Likert style questions, or even looking at that component of a mixed survey in which we find out more about their internal perceptions as well as how effective certain trainings or workshops were, we can create a very hopefully a narrative that actually compiles some of that quantitative and qualitative responses in one. That will be the small tease I can give you at this point. Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So you're totally right. And we are not going to be able to measure everything that we come up with as a tactic or strategy for this. And outcomes are going to be the most difficult for us to achieve. But there are some things that we can do, and there's some things that we've already done. One place that we've gone to is our business license list. So we have emails for every business that registers with the city. It's about 8,000 different businesses. We've already done a survey of all of those businesses to ask them demographic questions so we can understand what the current composition is of our business environment. And then we asked qualitative questions to get towards a lived experience of those folks of, do you feel supported by the city's economic development programming to be able to expand your businesses? And that's data that we already have. We actually did that several months ago. We'll be able to implement in particular some of the economic development focused programs that are in the current major city goal, and then resend out that survey and see if we've actually moved the needle in terms of some of those different demographic groups and the degree to which they feel like they're supported and feel like they can be successful in the city. The other plug I want to make for Nestor is that he's done a great job, and we now have a set list of demographic questions. We'll actually talk about it as a part of the next item with the public engagement and noticing manual. It's not an outcome metric, but it is an important quantitative tracking metric for us. In terms of folks that we are having participate in the public engagement processes, are we hearing from more folks from underrepresented and underserved communities. And now that we have a set list of demographic questions that we can attach to all the different surveys we do for all different types of policies and project work, we'll be able to track progress against that. Not necessarily an outcome metric, but I think it's an important quantitative metric for us to track and a part of the work that we're trying to accomplish with DEI.
City Manager.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, and I think Councilmanager Francis and Shoresman asked all this question. I think this is a question that comes up a lot. Is there a meta question that ultimately, drills down to, are we improving the opportunities for belonging and advancement? And so, Greg and I talk about this, and for some of the new council members, you may or may not know that we've done over the history kind of some longitudinal studies where we ask some of the some questions, and so we intend to expand that community survey the next time around, and want to add in some questions about a sense of belonging, and then ultimately judge and ascertain, do marginalized communities see themselves as having a footing here and to be able to advance themselves being who they are. And so how that question's asked and in a way that is disarming and people feel like they can engage with it, at least in some of my preliminary conversations with Mr. Herman, we're thinking about, is that a meta question that we can get at in terms of trying to ascertain how are communities feeling about their future, in living in San Luis Obispo.
Thank you, Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate all that. This seems like an area, this kind of social science-y area that would be great for gathering qualitative stories and anecdotes, but a lot harder to kind of drill down on hard data. So maybe a good opportunity for some social science major at Cal Poly to do some study work on as well. But thank you for those examples. The other thing that I wanted to ask a couple questions about were the communications pillar. This is an area where I think, and we'll talk about it obviously a little bit more with the next item on our agenda, but communications, especially with marginalized members of the marginalized communities, can be a very challenging thing to do, especially to get, as City Manager Johnson sort of implied just now, to get sincere and honest representations from people and creating an environment that allows for that to happen. So I think you had a slide where you talked about some of the communication methods that you would use during outreach, things like group, so I think it said focus groups or group interviews. That's one that I had kind of honed in on, connection with community partners and group interviews. If possible, it might be appropriate. I know it's a lot more difficult to do, but to do some one-on-one sort of more pointed sort of subject matter expertise interviews on a one-on-one basis, just you might get some better responses from people, certain people one-on-one than you would in a group environment. So I just wanted to sort of throw that out there. And then last but not least, since this is a document about inclusion and our practices around creating a more inclusive environment, I thought the vision statement, both vision statements were good and detailed and thorough. I wondered if this might be an idea to have in the document some sort of acknowledgement statement about the Indigenous people whose land we are currently living on and utilizing, just as a part of sort of the overall opening of the document. Just a thought.
Thank you. That's a fantastic addition. I did have one other thing. You mentioned in the beginning, this is kind of the culmination of the many things from the task force. And I would say, obviously, one of these, well, I would say there's one thing that kind of hasn't been touched upon, which is the community-based policing and restorative practices. Now, obviously, that'll be worked on more in the police strategic plan than this. However, when we talk about welcoming, inclusive, and safe, we didn't come back to that at all. So even if it is referring out to the PD strategic plan, or is it more than that? I think there's more than the police strategic plan, and it might be part of the discussions you have with people. But I think there's that's the one thing that's kind of missing in the plan. And I think going back to the meta question that the the city manager mentioned, this sounds like boiling it down to really basic, but do you have to leave the area to live your life? And I think that whether it's food or clothing or spices or hair, there have been experiences that we heard during the task force that was, you have to leave here to be able to live your normal life. And that seems like that's something that I don't know how to capture that in this plan, but I think that's something in the metrics section that it's more of an assessment than necessarily the specific KPI that when you talk about the qualitative, I think could be part of that metrics aspect. So just throwing that out as an idea. And I appreciate Mr. Herman about the grants and the outreach, and that is really a way we can be adaptable and sustainable. I think that is very true. And I think there's also that outreach aspect of, we always have like report outs here, but report outs in the community, I think is also something that we have to figure out how to do a little bit better, because if we're trying to amplify the nonprofits in their work, how do we include that in kind of the metrics? And just a couple weeks ago, I remember someone saying, I didn't even know there was this market. And so I think there's just this aspect of things are growing here and are happening here in the business world. And then yet the communities were used to nothing being here, so they were still leaving. And so just trying to think about if there's some way we can connect that you don't have to necessarily leave here might be a message, not in that way, of course. Deputy City Manager Herman.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to respond really quickly on the question, because it's a good one, about the police department and the interaction with the PD strategic plan. So two things. One, Nestor has done a great job of building this framework so that it will encompass all the work that's currently in the DEI major city goal for the 23-25 financial plan. It will, in effect, become a lot of the work for the first 2 years of the 5 years of the strategic plan. And as a part of that major city goal, there is a community-based policing section for the DEI goal that talks about 21st century policing and the 5-year PD strategic plan. And so you can expect to see that as a task within that pillar when we come forward with a final DEI strategic plan, because that's part of the work we're going to be doing anyway for the DEI major city goal. So that will live there.
Thank you. That helps me understand where that's missing, so appreciate that. Vice Mayor Marks.
Thanks. I just have a question, if there's been any thought given to performing exit interviews from people who have decided to leave the community. I know from years of being part of the Cal Poly community that there are many different ethnic studies professors and various staff people who've been brought in who are great and don't stick around very long. So I think there may have been some kind of exit interview stuff happening at Cal Poly, but I don't know if it's possible for us to do that in terms of our general population. If people are making statements like, I can't stay here because of X, Y, Z, whatever. And I have to say a lot of times that reason's economic. So just a question if we're going to be doing that kind of outreach, or if it's even possible. I'm not sure, but it might give us more concrete data rather than saying, do you feel like you belong? It's like, do I have a feeling? It's like, okay, well then we're trying to get data. It's like, I think feeling of loneliness and alienation and like that is universal. People go through depression all the time. And then how does that relate to the DEI objectives?
Thank you for that question. Something I should probably have mentioned in the public engagement strategy, we are also we will be creating as well a survey at large for the entire community. So that particular question, for example, could be something that we would add to find out if there are any particular reasons of why individuals would be considering leaving the area. And then we could potentially look into that and examine what are some of those reasonings and potentially correlate, see if there is any correlation on particular aspects of that they may feel that drive them away, right? But we will be conducting a survey at large as well for the entire community, so we will be able to collect some of that data.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, any public comment?
No, we do not.
Thank you very much. Oh, wait, City Manager Johnson, you had a question or comment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I just want to expand on the comments about the climate surveys. That there's some incredible work that's happening on campus, and so the Cal Poly experience. And there's been some surveys. I think there's been a number of years that I know Nestor's been talking to Dr. Macau about how we can collaborate and have those surveys speak in tandem, because we really want to know about not only what is the lived experience for students and faculty and staff on campus, but as they come into the community, how does that experience change? And so, there's ways that we're going to be able to leverage the work that Cal Poly is doing, but also, as Nestor just indicated, really then look at how does that compare to some of the community-wide survey data. So there's a lot of different points I think we'll be able to work back into. And I think to your question, Councilmember Francis, I think that's where then some of the analysis will come into play as we start to look at this. And I suspect we'll start to see broader statewide data, because that's particularly useful for our city in the past, as we've looked to some of our community surveys to look to see what are the comparative and benchmark cities that we're looking at and seeing how we're progressing. And then to really learn, okay, so we've implemented certain measures, we've made certain investments. Is there any correlation to what the data is telling to some of those investments or lack of investments?
Thank you so much. As I shared with President Armstrong, I felt it was a bit short-sighted not to include the city and alumni in that CPX Cal Poly experience. And I really look forward to our regional collaboration as we continue with the university. So thank you. Well, now is that time for going back to those 4 questions, if you wouldn't mind, Nestor. And if you all would like to, you feel free to answer all 4 at one time, or if you want to go with one at a time. Councilmember Pease, we'll let you kick it off.
Great, thank you, and happy to dialogue as we go also. Thank you, fabulous work, really excited about the framework. I think the vision statement is appropriate. Whatever fine tuning happens as the process goes. And I think the 4 proposed pillars are also, I think it's, a reasonable way to organize what we're trying to do, right? There's kind of this internal piece, we're trying to communicate, we've got our partners, and we're trying to keep the thing rolling, right? So there's kind of like, okay, how are we talking about that? And so that's making some sense. I feel the goal statements themselves or within each pillar, I think, again, we'll fine tune, but I think there may be more, I feel like they could be a little more to the point. I think they could be more approachable. I think we want to make this broadly approachable, and I feel like we're using some, it's not even wonky. It's like a aspirational kind of language, but it might alienate and leave some people out. So that's kind of my thinking about the goals themselves, kind of get to the point in a more direct way. Other than that, I'm really happy with the examples. I think the one kind of a general statement, but it comes up to me mostly in the community development and support goal. There's a promote awareness and inclusion, and it feels it's a little passive as far as the illustrative examples are coming up. And it's a little bit like I feel as much, I love our grant program. I think we need to continue with that. But I think at some point, we're leaving it to others to kind of come up with their ideas, and there might end up with gaps, right? So I feel like as we are talking here about provide venues and spaces for something, host a forum for a community partner and interest groups, whereas maybe like we are not understanding our local history. We don't have anybody stepping forward to do that. How can we build that partnership and really make something happen? That it still has all that partnership and communication, but it's something that isn't emerging organically from the community. So other than that, I think the public engagement, I think, the Council Shoresman's point about one-on-one interviews and just these hard to reach folks. But otherwise, I think it's coming together really well.
Thank you. I really appreciate hearing that about the approachable goals, because I have to say that's kind of why I said, so when we're talking about the vision statement, we're talking about the first sentence, right? Is it would be great if we can really, quite honestly, in everything we do, right? We add a lot of words, and we're at fault for that as well. And if we were just to say, you're standing in the elevator and you're doing your elevator pitch, what in the world is the DEI vision and what does DEI mean to the city? I get that a lot. And so when I'm trying to explain, I'm trying to make it as succinct as possible. And that sometimes I think is difficult. So if there is a way to make that a little bit easier, just to be able to share with people what our goals are, I do like that aspect. And I'm wondering around the gaps, it kind of reminds me actually of the last meeting, Vice Mayor, around the Adobe plan. But what's actually our plan for the other things that are missing? And I posted about Asian Pacific Islander Desi American Month this month, and some of our history is, the railroads and being laid here by the Chinese Americans at that time, and it expanded obviously, and just looking at, is it very clearly we need to expand not just on our history here, but the history that's missing here, and in these ways, task, and those to become the objectives. So I don't know if that's kind of where you're thinking. Is that where you're kind of going with? Okay. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, I think overall this is a really good document. I kind of gave a couple of my suggestions already while I was asking questions, but I concur with what the mayor says about the vision statement. I mean, I think it's a good, strong vision statement, but it is a little bit wordy, I guess, a little hard to remember. So I haven't been asked to give the elevator pitch yet, but I'm sure I will at some point. I like the 4 pillars. I like the general categories. I think all our city plans do a really good job of kind of creating these overall concepts and then putting more concrete examples and goals and objectives and strategies into them. And I think this is going in the right direction. The adaptability and sustainability one seems the one that's hardest for me to really wrap my head around. And to me, sustainability is, to me, that says, how are we going to know when we've done a good job, or when, not that we're done, because we're never going to be done with this, but how do we know when it's sustainable and all of these initiatives that we've done kind of can live on and have almost a life of their own? And I'm not quite seeing that totally fleshed out yet. I see the value in our grant programs too, and there's a lot of opportunity for innovation, and I see that in here, but I don't know that that's really sustainability. So I think we need to flesh that out a little bit more. And communication. You cannot over communicate, and you cannot get enough engagement on this topic. And I know you could also spend years doing that. So I don't want to say that you should do that. You have to kind of call it done at some point and create a document in the end. But that's going to be a big job. And I know you're up for it, and I know the team is up for it, but it's a big one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, I won't repeat most of what you've said because I would just say I've agreed with everything that everybody else up here has had to say, in particular some of the concerns around, especially as we get down into the adaptability and sustainability, kind of the more passive language and making sure that we have really clear vision of what that's going to look like. And I think that maybe is challenging because it's going to come over time, right? That's something that we'll get to and then maybe be able to articulate that a little bit more clearly. I'm happy with the vision statement with the small revisions that were suggested and the 4 proposed pillars. I think I already recommended my additions and alternatives. And yeah, I think the last bullet on engagement, yes, we do that and do it more. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Well, I would just want to start by saying that I think it is really important for our city and our community to fight hate and discrimination any way we can. I think this is a good start, although I have lots of questions about the reality of how it actually is going to emerge and what it means. But on Sunday, I attended Holocaust Memorial. Chief Scott was there as well up in Atascadero, and just a very serious reminder of what happens if people don't stand up and fight back in some way. I have to say that when we moved down here from the Bay Area, there were places that you could go in San Luis Obispo to have fun there was an integrated audience. There was now it's called Big Sky. It used to be TKs or TJs. It was West African food and fantastic groups from all over the place, African music, Caribbean. It was great. There was jazz, free jazz in the basement of what used to be what now is Novo. There were opportunities. There was a really thriving kind of gay bar scene that's not here anymore. There was a, and this is going back to like the early 90s, but to me, I'd like to see, I don't know how you do this, more opportunities for an integrated audience to have fun, and have a sense of, not being, how do I say, having a more kind of cosmopolitan atmosphere to the city. But the other thing I want to say is it's important to keep everyone informed, and we keep talking about metrics and data, and of course it's impossible to measure a lot of this stuff, but I think it's really important when it comes to our budget talks. Right now we seem pretty solvent. If the city comes to a place where we have to make cuts, then it will be really important that the DEI program is able to stand up for itself and say, here's how we justify the dollars that are spent and then that will be spent in the future. So I do support this.
Thank you so much, and thank you to my colleagues for the great conversation. So answering the 4 focus questions, I do concur with the DEI vision statement, as mentioned, obviously with a little bit of changes. I do appreciate the 4 proposed pillars, and the adaptability and sustainability, I also am a little challenged by, I think also being that we have said early on that we are trying to become carbon neutral by 2035. We're focusing a lot on sustainability and climate, that I just worry that sometimes those words get confused a little bit. And I know it's an actual word, just like other words are actual words, but they get taken by other movements. So just, a thought around that is you might want to, what is the purpose of the sustainability word, and is it the long-standing aspect? And I love the idea what you said, Councilmember Shorsman, about like, if we're kind of doing the thing that we're supposed to be doing, then we're really looking at how do we add depth to those in the future instead of having to constantly look at what else are we needing to add because we're not doing the right things to include people or to have representation or whatever it might be. What does that look like? And I think third bullet, we've added plenty of things. We'll move on from that. The fourth item, does City Council feel the proposed approach to public engagement is sufficient? Well, obviously, one, we're going to our public engagement and noticing manual next, so there's more to add in that. And I think we'll come back to that, but I think the key of communication is key, is essential, I should say. And also remembering that we need to communicate with our entire community, because if you don't have lived experience, it can be confusing why we're talking about this. So I want to make sure that we are helping everyone understand why we're trying to grow together as a community. And I think that's really important that we're including just as much as actually interacting and creating that representation that we need to with each with each identity out there as well. Yeah, so I'll just leave that at that. So I think we've answered all the main things. Councilmember Francis?
I just wanted to put in a plug for what you mentioned earlier, that in every document we can, if we can have a little historic preamble of why are we doing what we're doing and what is the history of our community that brought us to do this. I think in this particular case, the history itself would be really, really important. And anytime we can do that, I'd be very much in favor. I know that's a heavy lift though, so I understand. But I think it could be helpful, particularly in bringing this to more audiences that might have questions about the why.
Said by the history teacher. Thank you so much. No, it's very true. And I think the why we had to kind of re-explain numerous times in the DEI task force because we weren't looking at everything at that moment because there was a moment in time as to why we were kind of focusing in on BIPOC and LGBTQ plus at that moment. But realistically, in this realm of the DEI task force for the entire city, we're looking at all of the identities for the entire city. So I think that's very important to make sure we're making that clear. So, well, I think you got more than you wanted. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay, well, thank you so much. We really appreciate all the work. Thank you to my colleagues for all the input. Oh, so sorry. Councilmember Francis, did you have one thing? Okay, perfect. Great. So we're gonna go ahead and go on a break for about 10 minutes. We'll see you back at 8:25. Well, thank you very much for the break. We will go ahead and get started. We have the next topic is the endorsement of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Update to the Public Engagement and Noticing Manual. We'll have Deputy City Manager Greg Herman and Public Communications Manager Whitney Santisi present. And I believe Greg Herman would like to speak first.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and council members. We are still happy to be here, and thank you for recognizing Whitney Santisi, our public communication manager. I just wanted to take a moment and thank her for all of her individual efforts to bring this item forward tonight. This is a DEI-focused update to our public engagement and noticing manual. It's the first major update that we've done since 2015. I know that because I was actually part of the staff group that worked on the 2015 version of this manual. Derek was as well. It was a great project. And I was thinking a lot back to when we first made that one. And one of the big changes that we made at that time in 2015, Open City Hall was a brand new tool to the city of San Luis Obispo. It had not existed before. We used it to work on a whole bunch of different policy initiatives. It was a little bit of an experiment, and I think it was actually one of our early moves into trying to be more inclusive in our public engagement processes. And what it ended up showing us is that there was actually a lot more people out there that wanted to be engaged. They just needed the right opportunity to be able to be engaged. And now Open City Hall is continuing strong. And I see all of the updates that are being proposed tonight as us continuing to go down that path and finding more people and providing the right opportunities for them to be able to take part in the processes that we've got. Our recommendation for tonight is for the council to endorse updates to the Public Engagement and Noticing Manual, and those will serve as the guide for staff to increase diverse participation in city programs, policies, and projects. I'll be brief, but just hitting on the policy context for this item, and it's included in the staff agenda report as well. And it really gets to the why behind public engagement. But the city has a mission statement. The mission statement speaks specifically to community involvement and commitment to providing opportunities for all persons to participate. The vision statement, which we referenced as a part of the previous item, speaks specifically to diversity and inclusivity. And we are also here because this is one of the very specific work tasks in the current year. DEI major city goal was to provide this update, and so we're able to deliver that on time. Also, we've updated a number of different policies across the city since 2015. One of them is the case update recently approved by the council, and this helps to align this document with those other policies. As I mentioned, the first manual was created in 2015. At that time, we had really varying levels of engagement across city departments. How Public Works might engage the public for a construction project might be very different than how the police department might engage the public for a different service that they're able to offer might be very different than how administration might engage the public. And so the idea was pretty simple, to create a guide that set a consistent level of engagement across city departments for all of the different opportunities that we have to engage the public. The other goal was to involve policymakers, all of you, in helping to set that expectation with the community about what that engagement would look like. And so similar to the DEI strategic plan update that we just brought to council, setting the expectation that we're essentially going to use all the tools available to engage the public, inform, consult, and collaborate. Will help you give us some guidance as we have study session type items, especially when it's early on in a project or policy, and you can help guide us as to the level of engagement that you expect. We can then deliver on that and set reasonable expectations with the community. As you'll see in a second, and is included in the staff report, we've been pretty well served actually by this document. I think we've seen pretty consistent engagement over time, and engagement that we consistently hear is significant for the size of city that we have. It's also been great. I've presented on this guide at conferences. We've won some awards for it, and I think it's been able to serve as a model for a lot of cities. But a lot has changed since 2015, and it needs to be updated. The updates that are covered tonight are because we have new tools that are available that didn't exist at that time. We have different processes that are out there, and then more specifically, Whitney and her team have done an incredible job of creating content. We have more content and higher level or higher quality content that we've had before, and our charge now is to make sure that content reaches people. And to be able to reach people and the most amount of people, we need to know the right ways to be able to connect with those folks. And so these updates are really about the reach side of the equation, and in particular, folks who are traditionally underrepresented in different government processes. To find out more about how we're going to do that exactly, I will turn it over to Whitney.
Thanks, Greg. So how many people are we currently reaching? More people than ever before. The city continues to reach more people as evidenced by the growing number of page views on our website. As you can see here, we're tracking from 2015 when we first launched our website to 2023, and you can see the upward trajectory. Since 2015, the city's website page views have increased by 77%. In 2015, our pages were viewed 1.2 million times, and in 2022, they were viewed 2.2 million times. This past year alone, the website pages were viewed more than 3 million times, and that's a 72% increase over the year before. The reason I bring this up is because we're really focused on reach and making sure that people are seeing the content that we're posting. So page views are an important metric for us. Likewise, over 22,000 people have visited Open City Hall since we launched Open City Hall, and as Greg mentioned, it's our official public engagement platform for all levels of engagement, whether we're trying to inform folks or consult with the community or collaborate, trying to get new ideas. We use that tool for all three. And our social media presence has also grown significantly since we first kind of launched our Facebook page in 2019. Going back to look at the data, you can see there's a nice trajectory in overall impressions. And again, you know, this is the number of times our content was shown to people. Obviously, there's a spike in May 2021. We all know what happened. Unfortunately, that spike in impressions was not due to something positive. Instead, it was related to the incident that took Detective Luca Benedetti from us. So when we look at these spikes, we really have to look at them holistically. We have to look at them together as a bigger picture, and not just look at one or two or three, look at it as a whole. So this particular update really focuses on underserved and underrepresented communities. What you have listed here is something that there are 13 variables that have been listed by SLOCOG, the San Luis Obispo Council of Governments, to help us identify the different variables of underserved and underrepresented groups. Not all 13 are listed here, but I think this is a really good illustration for us to think about who are we not reaching. The focus of these updates is to better engage underserved and underrepresented communities, which includes those who disproportionately experience economic stress, who are historically underrepresented as part of the local government process. And unfortunately, after reviewing some of the limited user data on our website, like Google Analytics, with our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, we're not able to gather a lot of demographic information from these tools. However, we are able to identify that we are reaching mostly English-speaking white adults without disabilities. And this isn't surprising because of when we look at the city of San Luis Obispo population via census data, that is the majority of the population. It's clear, though, who we're not reaching. One of the tools I used most recently was the economic development survey that we had sent out. We got a really good number of responses from that. And in the very beginning of that survey, we included demographic data or demographic questions. We don't always include those in our surveys, although moving forward, that's going to be something we're going to be doing. What became really clear from that information was that the people that we're not reaching, or the people that we're having trouble reaching, is Gen Z, not surprising, people with a disability, people who identify as Hispanic or Latinx, and people who primarily speak Spanish or other languages at home. We all know that communities work best when community members, organizations, and institutions are engaged and working together for the good of all. That's the whole purpose of this public engagement and noticing manual update. We're really focused on creating equitable engagement. And when I think equitable engagement, I think also authentic and meaningful engagement. That's something that became really clear very early on when we started this project. We surveyed staff, and one of the struggles that they had was, sure, they could reach a lot of people, but they felt they weren't getting as meaningful of engagement as they could have. So that's really what this particular update focuses on. So what hasn't changed? Let's go into what's in the manual. The levels of engagement have not changed. The Penn manual still offers 3 different levels of engagement: inform, consult, and collaborate. And we want to think of these levels of engagement as a spectrum, not individual and on their own. So for a project, you might actually move from one end of the spectrum to another. And it's really important to understand that one project might start with inform or might start with collaborate, while another project might start with consult. And so it's really important to identify your audiences and identify the decision makers and identify the problem and the opportunities that we're trying to focus on. The Penn manual also still shows audiences by areas of interest. We just expanded the list. So just as with the previous Penn manual, our audiences listed as part of the areas of interest is not comprehensive. It's not exhaustive. We know that. And we are really working on making sure that we have a separate list specifically for consult and collaborate, so staff can actually reach out to specific contacts. And so we have a separate list that we're maintaining. If anybody wants to get on that list, we are going to be creating a landing page on our website that will include ways to sign up for those different collaborate and consult lists, based on topic area. People can also email me at communications@slowcity.org. And for the informed level of engagement, we're really going to be encouraging people to sign up for our e-notifications and follow us on social media. That's going to be the main area of focus when it comes to us informing people. We will still keep the people on the list who are under the consultant collaboration topic areas, but it's really important that it kind of balances out where the community needs to take that step to be informed and stay informed. And people can subscribe at slowcity.org/subscribe. And the current PAN manual, just like the current PAN manual, we have best practices and questions to consider before engagement begins. So what's new? One thing that we heard from staff was they weren't quite sure how to use the PAN manual. Once it was socialized in 2015, and then we had a pandemic, and things kind of got turned on their heads. And since then, we've also had a lot of staff turnover. There hasn't been a lot of training when it comes to the PAN manual, and so there's just been a little bit of confusion about how to use it. So one of the things I wanted to make sure we did was create a step-by-step process for staff so that they could really understand how to develop a successful public engagement plan, because that's really the purpose of the public engagement and noticing manual. So there are 5 steps in this process. Number 1, understand the situation, specifically trying to identify the problem that we're trying to solve or the opportunity that we're trying to seize. It's not a time for us to develop tactics. It's not a time for us to think about what we need to be focused on doing. Rather, it's a time to look at what we have done. It's a time to look at what other organizations have done. It's a time to look at, focus on research and analysis. And it's also a chance for our staff to actually fully understand the issue at hand and lay the groundwork for a successful public engagement plan. Step 2 is define your audience. It's really important to identify who you're trying to speak to. And I think that's one of the struggles, as a city. Sometimes we're like, well, we're trying to speak to everybody. But when it comes to public engagement, what I've really kind of honed down to is I created a tool for audiences, and it's called the Audience Mapping Tool. And it allows staff to understand, okay, who am I speaking to, not only in terms of interest area, but also impact. How are people going to be impacted? What is the level of impact people are going to feel from this decision or this project or this program? And making sure that we are thinking not just interest, but impact as well. You'll see that the audience section of this updated PAN manual is much more extensive than the previous version. We've included basically definitions of hard to reach communities. We've included information about people with disabilities and the actual efforts that we have to take to make sure that all of our events and our information is accessible. So that's a key part of understanding and defining your audience, knowing what the barriers are to engagement and understanding what you might need to do to overcome those barriers. Next is identify the level of engagement. Once we have a better understanding of the current situation and we have an understanding of the people that we need to reach, now it's important to identify the appropriate level of engagement. And I've repeated that over and over in the PAN manual, the appropriate level of engagement, because, and I think somebody said it earlier tonight, but you could just keep going on and on and on and on with engagement and never really land on anything. And so it's really important that we complete projects and we get work done and we serve the community in the best way that we can. So this PAN manual really focuses on focusing on the level or identifying the level of engagement per project based on the decision maker, based on the audiences, and based on the resources that are allocated to that project, whether it's staff resources or funding. Step 4 is develop an action plan. We've actually built out an engagement toolbox that clearly identifies what tools or techniques are expected for each level of engagement. We've also added a wide range of other tools that are not necessarily expected but are available for staff who may want to use them. Those specific tools may be beneficial in helping us reach specific audiences. And so I wanted to make sure we try to have a more, as much of a comprehensive list of tools and techniques as we possibly could. Obviously, new technologies are going to come on, and we're going to adopt new practices. And I can't predict the future, but I try to include everything I could possibly think of in that list. Number 5 is review and evaluate. In this step, we are asking staff to take the time to not only during the engagement process, but afterwards, review and evaluate how it went. One of the things we all know, we're all busy, right? Sometimes evaluation can get overlooked when we're so focused on moving on to that next project or moving on to that next service that we're providing. However, evaluating what worked and what didn't will help lead to future successes. And so I think it's really important that we take that time, even if it's just a few minutes, to sit there and evaluate. I'm also going to be providing tools to staff on how to evaluate specific engagement plans. New is our audiences and tools. I spoke a little bit about this, but we did a considerable amount of work to define the audiences up front. Part of that was because sometimes for specific topics or specific areas of interest, there might be obvious audience groups, and there might be less obvious audience groups. We tried to identify some of the less obvious ones and include those in the PAN manual to make sure that it was a thought exercise for staff. Okay, this group may not be a person or a group that we've engaged in the past, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't engage them in the future. And so helping staff think a little bit broader when it comes to engagement for things like access and parking, housing, recreation, transportation. One thing we heard from our DEI partners when we were creating the PEN manual update was that there are certain topics that certain groups are just going to want to know about. Transportation is something that affects almost everybody. Housing affects everybody. But what we heard was certain audiences just have barriers to engagement, whether those barriers to engagement are economic or sometimes social, sometimes they just can't get childcare. There are a lot of different barriers to engagement. And so how do we really overcome those barriers to engagement is kind of the focus of the audience and tools that are provided. So I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the engagement toolbox. We have updated the manual to provide this toolbox basically to help staff basically check off, here are the things we need to be doing. It's really meant to serve as a guide that is helpful for staff and makes this an easier and more efficient process. Yes, some projects are going to require a lot more engagement than others. And there may be cases in which there's much more engagement than is what is expected. But we wanted to make sure that we included the expectations based on what we're currently doing, based on the expectations of the community that we're serving, and based on equitable engagement. So when we look at the informed level of engagement, this one focuses on, or the updates include posting information on a highly visible place on the department section of slowcity.org. Even linking on the homepage is an option. Sharing information via city news stories and email updates in English and Spanish. Sharing information via social media in English and Spanish. Sharing information with toolkits with key contacts and partners so that they can help us get the word out. What I found is that a lot of our partner organizations are doing things like focus groups and things like that. So we don't have to hold our own. We can actually work with them to add a question to their focus group. So really working with key contacts to help with that inform aspect. presenting information to applicable advisory bodies, and notifying the public via legal notice if required. When we look at the consult level of public engagement, this one is really focused on two-way communication and generally includes when officials have ideas already on the table or a way that they need to go about doing things, and they just need feedback on the possible options. So that's kind of what the consult tool or consult level of engagement is really focused on. In order to successfully add this to a public engagement plan, we want staff to really look at all of the tools listed in the informant expectations that I just went over, but also one or more of the following. Create a more formal open city hall topic with a poll, a survey, or formal feedback. We've done this from everything from our homelessness response strategic plan to we did this for our oh, it's escaping me. Sorry. We've done it for several projects and programs. So another idea is to host a pop-up informational booth in affected surrounding neighborhoods if applicable. Like if there's a project happening in a neighborhood, in a specific neighborhood, and it's not happening all around the city, maybe consider going straight to that neighborhood to consult with that group. Present a study session at a relevant advisory body meeting or city council meeting, and note direction and public comment if applicable. Host listening sessions to get specific community concerns and understand expectations, and prepare an item or presentation for a public hearing if it's legally required. And on to the collaborate level of engagement. Collaborate is really characterized by two-way communication and refers to an open-ended process. Maybe we know what the problem is. We know what, we have an opportunity, but we just don't have any real solid ideas. Collaborate is really focused on getting those ideas from the community. So to do that, we're asking staff to think about, inform, and consult expectations plus one or more of the following. Create an open city hall topic with annotations or ideas. This is a much more open-ended way of using Open City Hall. Present a study session at a council meeting and invite community groups to participate. Host focus groups with regular check-ins before and after the decision is made. Request to attend and gather ideas at community-based organization meetings and gatherings. Host community meetings or workshops using feedback gathering technology. Right now we're using a tool called Slido. We use that for the community forum. We've also used it for different community workshops. Most recently, the Rigetti workshop that we had for open space and the parks that are going in that area of San Luis Obispo, and it's really well received. So while that may not be the tool that we're using every single time, using some sort of feedback gathering tool is helpful when you have a community meeting or a workshop. So what kind of outreach did we do for the DEI updates to the public engagement and noticing manual? We collaborated with DEI partners, including Cal Poly, UndocuSupport, Diversity Coalition, Lumina Alliance, United Way of SLO County, and many, many more organizations. We consulted DEI and public engagement experts, including the Office of DEI, Independent Living Resource Center, and International Association for Public Participation. We consulted city staff and the Human Relations Commission. And next, we're really going to be focused on that inform level of engagement. So what does that look like? We need to finalize the Penn Manual updates and create materials for staff to put into practice the ideas that are in this Penn Manual. We are going to be creating supplemental materials for staff, including an editable workbook with checklists, survey best practices, meeting best practices, up-to-date templates and contact lists, venue lists, and more for staff. And then we're also going to focus on informing staff by training. So training is going to be really important, and one of the things we're going to be working on is doing a monthly pen manual training and just leaving it open to the staff who want to participate. Obviously, training new staff is really important as well as they come on, so that they understand here are the expectations moving forward. And then we also want to keep the community informed on the different ways to engage with the city. So we're going to take the pen manual and kind of turn it into a public version of it. That really helps community members know, okay, here's how I stay informed, here's how I can get consulted, here's how I collaborate with the city. And really help specifically underserved and underrepresented groups that know what the options that are available to them. And with that, I'd like to recommend that the council endorse the updated public engagement and noticing manual to serve as a strategic guide for staff to increase diverse participation in city programs, projects, and policy decisions.
Wow, thank you so much. This is an amazing, I have to tell you, when I was reading the packet, I was like, yes, great, great, you're on it. And it was a really fabulous experience. This whole entire packet, I have to say, not just in this one topic. But anyway, the one thing you mentioned that I wasn't sure, you mentioned something about training monthly. Would that include onboarding as well for brand new employees? Okay, like, so how would that work? Because they may or may not need to do public engagement, right, in their roles. So if you could expand on that, that'd be great.
We would be working with departments to identify who would be the kind of leaders of public engagement, whether it's a project manager, a program manager, even program coordinators. And as those positions are filled, they would get basically the updated list of options for training for the pen manual. So it's not going to be like an immediate training. It's going to be offered monthly, and folks are going to be able to sign up for it.
Okay, perfect.
And attend.
And one more question before I go to get with Councilmember Francis. You said there was going to be, the primary focus would be on social media. And then, so if people want to reach or learn about what we have going on, they can sign up for the e-notifications. And that's the two main focuses on how we're communicating with the community.
Those are the expectations. We also have a lot of tools that we use. It's not technically an expectation. We use things like direct mail. We use things like environmental things like flyers and posters, signage. But we wanted to make sure that people understood that if there's a bare minimum, how do I stay informed? Email updates and social media are going to be the bare minimum.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Francis.
Do you have a question?
I was just going to add that there's also a baseline level of engagement that happens in terms of all of our legally required postings that happen out in front of City Hall, in our newspaper of record. And then, we're always available at City Hall to answer questions. So there's a variety of ways that folks end up contacting us at the city, and there's a baseline level that's available to folks who want an in-person, over-the-phone experience as well.
Great, thank you. I'm thinking of people who are not able to or don't want to use technology. How do we still inform them? So thank you. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you. This is wonderful. I'm really excited and I particularly liked the Getting Started Quick Guide. I thought that was incredibly useful, just thinking about being in the shoes of a staff member and wondering how to even begin to approach this process. Something that we had talked a little bit about in our 221 is when you get down to that evaluate step and what happens after the evaluation, and you determined the outreach was insufficient in some way. How does the staff then navigate that process, and what are the expectations around that, and how do they know to do that? So sort of the expectations and then also the limitations. How do you know when you tried and you got what you got and it's now time to move on? I feel like there's kind of two pieces there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as part of the understanding the situation step, that very first step, understanding how you're going to measure success is part of that. And so identifying certain metrics, whether if it's in form, looking at page views, if it's, reach for underrepresented groups, see how many of our DEI partners included it in their newsletter. Depending on the level of engagement, there might be actually different kind of metrics that they can look at. And so it's just a matter of helping staff understand what are the options available to them based on the level of engagement that they plan to do.
And if that then doesn't manifest, then what?
That's a really good question. Yeah, one of the things that we've included in the public engagement and noticing manual is that, if we don't do the work up front to engage the right people at the right time, it's going to cause delays in a project or a program. And hopefully with this PEN manual, they'll be able to actually identify whether they're reaching their goals throughout the engagement process. Step number 5 is not just focused on the end. It's focused on making sure that they're measuring it throughout the duration so that they can understand what's working and what's not and shift like mid-project. However, if that doesn't happen, they might have to go to the drawing board and engage more people and take more time. But I think it's really important to evaluate that so that we know whether or not that has occurred.
I think City Manager Johnson wants to add in.
And, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Francis, I think there's also a waypoint if we're engaging, and typically the significant policy or projects are going to go to some advisory body, and along the way we're going to get feedback at some point, we maybe have missed a group, and so we'll stop, reevaluate. And I think that's a key part of this as you're moving through your project plan. And so on the project plan side, when we do project management with teams, we're always encouraging them to say, this is the project management plan is day one, but you're going to learn things and you need to be nimble and you need to adjust as you go through the process. And so you may get feedback on a community meeting, there's a lot more interest, or we heard about this. And so we just need to be flexible along the way. And it will happen at some point that we'll bring something to the city council and we'll miss someone. And I think we just all have to have the ability to say, okay, all right, we're going to take a pause here, and we've heard from a lot, but I think there's probably some more outreach. And so before we make a final decision, we want to go back. We hope that that's not the norm, and it certainly will be the exception, but I think staff's prepared that sometimes we're not always going to get it right.
And I think with this tool, we'll probably not run into that very often. I had another question. So one of the things that we had talked about in our meeting was that list of contacts, and that you felt that somewhat inevitably there are going to be groups left off. And then you did a really nice job talking about today how people can reach out to get added to the list through the website and through you. But I was looking through that list, and I'm guessing they're in kind of no particular order. But then I was thinking about if I was a staff member, particularly somebody who was new to the process, figuring out how to navigate that list and thinking about what priority groups, because maybe in a particular list there are just too many or more than you would actually need to reach out to for a project, and figuring out how do you begin to navigate the different group lists, and what's that going to look like from the staff perspective?
One of the things that we considered after we finished this draft is whether or not we want to have such a list. Rather than focusing on specific groups. Maybe we think broader and think, rather than calling out specific organizations, we call out types of organizations to help staff think a little bit differently about it. And then on our contact list, the one that we're maintaining, will have the specific organizations that are available to staff if they're wondering, okay, what does a DEI partner mean? So then we would provide them with the list of DEI partners.
I like that approach. That seems to make a lot of sense, particularly since it might be hard to figure out the prioritization in that list as you're just looking through. So thank you so much.
Councilmember Pease.
Thank you. Thanks for all the work on this. Similar question, but the opposite. So in the sense of, what if we're going the other way? I mean, such a thing as outreach fatigue, like, is there going to be a way to kind of calibrate if somebody's kind of going over the top on thinking how much engagement is needed, and you throw a workshop and 5 people show up, you're like, it's maybe not as, so what's the balance to calibrate against outreach fatigue that people aren't going to engage and adjusting along the way?
Yeah, it's something that we've experienced, and I think it's going to be something that we're going to continue experiencing. I mean, I've heard survey fatigue, but that can't stop us from trying to survey folks to get information. I think ways that we can kind of prevent that from happening is really looking at, it's that first step, that situational awareness. What have we done in the past? Look at previous surveys and see if the data is there for you to start. Rather than creating a whole brand new survey. There might be a question in a previous survey that we've done that might help answer that specific problem. Likewise, there are going to be times when we put together workshops and community events and a handful of people show up. The purpose of this DEI update is to focus on how do we get people to not just show up in person, but think beyond that. So we're really focused on the hybrid meeting model. We're focused on offering multiple opportunities for workshops. So not just we're offering this one opportunity at 10 a.m. No, think about we're offering this one opportunity at 10 a.m., another opportunity the next day at 6, another opportunity the next day at noon, so that we can hit different groups who are available at different times. So making sure that we're accommodating for those barriers of engagement.
Thanks. That makes sense too. Just because you're not getting a big turnout for that thing doesn't necessarily mean that there's not the interest. And then I know, like on the social media posts, there's a whole calendar, right? Because you don't want slam people all at once. Is there that type of coordination? Are you kind of the point person, so we're not doing workshops accidentally back to back on similar, that might attract similar audiences, or some other coordination?
One of the tools that we are going to be using more frequently is our community calendar on our website to help us identify what's happening when. All staff are going to have access to that, so they can see if there's already a workshop happening on a specific day. That might not prevent that doubling up. In some cases, that might be okay. They might have different audiences or different intended audiences. But at least that could offer staff an opportunity to say, oh, they're already doing this workshop. Maybe we should tack onto that and go to the workshop and maybe have a booth or have a table with some information. So offering those tools that everybody's using, I think really helps kind of create that collaboration just inherently.
And I think City Manager wanted to add to that too.
And thank you, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Pace. I think that we experience this sometimes where when you say kind of outreach fatigue, and sometimes it's the opposite, where we have a lot of people showing up and it's these intractable issues that we just can't get resolved. And sometimes there's the belief, well, if we just go out and have another public workshop or have another public meeting or have a community forum, that somehow the magic answer is going to emerge. And so I think there's a little bit of judgment sometimes. I think we all can probably imagine a project that fits into that category, and where we said, we knew the universe of options, and we just needed to make the decision. And so sometimes for staff, that's just having the professional kind of wisdom to be able to decide, okay, we've heard all the options, articulate what those options are, and then bring them forward to the decision makers.
Thanks.
Thank you. Did you have other questions? Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Shorsman.
Hi, thank you so much. A great document, of course, no surprise from a communications professional like yourself. But I do have a couple of kind of specific questions about some of the things that just kind of caught my eye when I read the document. On page 296 of the packet, there's a reference to SlowCog's website and sort of an interactive map that they have there about locating disadvantaged communities. And I was just wondering, it lists 13 elements that are identified in the map. And I wondered, is there some sort of expectation of how staff are supposed to use that as a tool? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, so that actually came up when we shopped this around to staff and collaborated with staff and consulted with staff on what are the tools that are available to us. That specific tool was mentioned in the climate adaptation and safety element of the general plan, so that update. And we wanted to make sure that we called out the tools that are in these documents and included them in the Penn manual. So it's just one extra tool for staff to use. It's not the only tool for staff to use to identify underrepresented groups or locations. That one's specifically a map of different locations. And it's an option for people to say, okay, if we want to serve this group, maybe we can have a meeting in this location, versus just focusing on specific locations only. So really, it's a location kind of based tool.
Okay. And then on page 301, I think you have a section where you talk about people with communications disabilities, and it mostly focuses on, vision problems, hearing problems, speech disabilities. One of the things that's kind of been a challenge to me that I've noticed so far in this role is communicating with people who have disabilities, especially around, and Mayor Stewart mentioned this a little bit, but especially around use of the internet and going online and maybe filling out an application online or using Open City Hall. Some people with disabilities are pretty homebound, or they have maybe intellectual disabilities that inhibit them from really providing feedback to us on some of these things. And those are the people that we really need to reach. So when it's more complicated than just providing a translator or making something to a lower literacy level, how do we reach those folks?
So what I would tell staff is really focus on leaning on the organizations that serve those communities, because they already have those relationships. They already have the different ways of keeping them informed or engaging them, and ask what's the best way to engage this group. There might be some surprising answers, but I think that, for example, like the Independent Living Resource Center is a great resource for us that we could be tapping into very frequently to identify, okay, we need to really reach out to specific audiences with disabilities. What are the different disabilities we need to be considering? And they are a fantastic organization. In fact, they sent me information that helped inform the Penn manual update. So that's just one example.
Great. And then I think last, thought I was going to sneeze. I almost did, but it went away. Page 303, I think, is the one that has the really great table that shows inform, consult, collaborate. And this is one of my favorite parts of this revision, to be honest, because this is the part that I felt like in the old document was a little bit unclear, a little bit confusing. And this is just much clearer. But I wondered in particular about, I think it's about collaborate, why we would not use collaborate if the decision maker is city staff or a department head. I noticed that council is sort of the main or the only decision maker when you're using the collaborate sort of level of this table. But when an advisory body or a city manager is making the decision, or even a department head, sometimes under inform, why that distinction? Seems like we might want to have some collaborative communications even when some of those other entities are making decisions.
Yeah, I mean, that might be something we want to revisit, and making sure that we add some of these other decision makers in there. I think that's a really good point.
Okay, thank you. And then 309, I think, is just references appendices. Is that some of where you're going to put the toolbox tools that you were talking about earlier?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. That was actually one of my questions, Councilmember Shorsman, around the inform. If you think you need to just inform someone, but then you get all this feedback that you weren't expecting to get, that may make you have to shift. I guess that's my concern, City Manager.
Yeah, and the city attorney were just having some conversation. I mean, that's inherently what we do is we get lots of feedback. And in some cases, all the time from the community. And in some cases, in most cases, the authority that's derived of our decision making is really guided by council policy, and in most cases it's largely ministerial decisions. And so, that's why we do inform, because to some extent we're not, if we get engagement, we don't want to get into, well, are we going to revise the policy, do changes? And so it's a careful balancing act. I think, it's a little bit of both, inform and engage, and sometimes it's just simply inform folks of the decision and then really try to articulate what the impact is.
Got it, thank you. I think the only other thing I was thinking about, and I don't really know how, this goes back to Councilmember Francis' question around the groups in the list and the appendices, which I appreciate. I know as we talked about that in our one-on-one, and people don't know what they don't know. So I'm just thinking, like, how do they know to get on your list sometimes? And if you don't know who they are in the first place, which is kind of where we started, I don't know, 3 years ago in this conversation. So I just kind of worry about that a little bit, but I think through the DEI plan from earlier in this day, I think we'll be fine. But it is something I think about with like almost different identities. Sometimes you need someone to invite them to the party. Like they have to physically be asked, hey, we need you to be part of this feedback. And so I hope that there's some of that in the conversation when you're doing the process. Does that sound like something possible?
Yes, and I do want to mention that since the public engagement and noticing manual updates went live as part of the agenda packet, we already started getting emails and questions about being added to different audience interest areas. And so, I think just having the list is helping people see, oh, I might not be on this list. And I think just getting the word out about those interest areas and the different ways to get informed and the different ways that the city will consult different groups and collaborate with different groups. It's all kind of part of the next steps.
Great, thank you. I think of it kind of as that media list that always changes.
Yeah, exactly.
If there's no other questions, are there any public comment?
Yes, we have one. Jerry Clemens.
Hey, I'm Jerry. I'm from San Luis Obispo. I was originally going to talk and compliment Derek and Greg on the great work that they did in 2015, and it must feel really, really nice to see the progress of your experiment and what it has led to today. That's it. I really wanted to thank you. That was, it was really just cool. And this is really a great presentation. Not that that wasn't either, but this is because I've had questions about this, about how are we really reaching the public? And then when I saw all those numbers, I'm going, wow, we really are reaching the public. But the thing, I happen to have a visual disability. I wasn't able to read for a very, very long time from a head injury. And that's also affected balance, all that other stuff. And that's the thing that I didn't hear in this, because what I was hearing is for the sighted, and I still have a hard time. Because I get vertigo. And headaches from reading too long. So that my question is, there are a lot of people that have different visual impairments. Now, they aren't blind like myself, And so what is the, are you doing like audio? Is there a way to do an audio if somebody calls? I don't have a clue really how to find out about most of what you're talking about, all the different, there's too much. For me, it's just too much. That's my limitation. So then I depend on my friends, and, but anyway, that's my thing. I think it's really important to remember, but I know you can't, there's too many groups. I mean, how do you specialize every group? But the visual impaired, that has to be applied. If we could, I had the thought there, now it went, but because there is a way to do it. Yeah, but maybe you are, and I just don't know about it. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And that is definitely a conversation that I have with the city clerk and city manager often of, I can't hear this item, it's not working. So I think that is a very valid point, and I look forward to how you continue to work on that.
I did just want to mention that one of the things we're going to be including as kind of a checklist whenever we're hosting events, whether it's a webinar or it's an in-person event, that we have some language in there that accommodations can be made for any language or communications disability, because we want to make sure people understand that we have aids that are available to them. And we will just need at least 3 business days to kind of put that together. So the request is that we would ask the community member to request accommodations 3 business days in advance. And that'll be on like every flyer for events and on the community events on our website as well.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Well, at this point, Vice Mayor Marks will start off our deliberation.
Thank you. Well, I just want to commend this work. I really have gone over it quite a bit, and I'm very impressed. I think it's really practical and analytical. I like the breaking it down into inform, collaborate, or consult and collaborate will help staff think like, do I really need, maybe all I need to do is just get the word out. And so I do think the department heads and the managers are going to need to manage the staff that reports to them, also to make sure that staff doesn't get so excited about outreach that they forget about the rest of their job, right? Because it could really take a whole lot of time. But it'll, especially as it's kind of new, there'll be a bit of a shakedown, I think. I do want to say that what the city's done already has had a very positive effect, in my opinion, in that we don't have vast numbers of people showing up at city council meetings who just plain don't understand the facts about what's going on, as we have in the past. There's a lot more information that's hard data and factual that's going out. And so I think that's really kind of lowered the temperature in terms of what we see here during our city council meetings and also the advisory bodies. So if there's lack of information, what happens often is that people just make things up. They fill in the blanks. It's part of the human nature to, figure, well, what are they up to? What's the government up to, right? So, and I'm remembering back to the day that we depended mostly on postcards, and the postcards had such small print on them, or it was actually smeared, the ink was smeared, that people couldn't even read it. And they say, hey, they'd show up and say, I got a postcard. I know something's going on. I don't know what it is. They'd show up at city council and ask us. So I do think this is a great step forward, and well, I'm glad the DEI additions that have been placed there. So, thank you. That's all I have to say. And I do support this. I don't know. Do we have to vote on it? No.
We will, yes.
Okay. I'll make the motion when the time is.
Sounds good. Thank you. Councilmember Shorsman.
Yeah, I'll just conclude with my remarks to say that, as I said before, this is a much clearer, more straightforward manual than it was before. I think the 2015 version, thanks to Deputy City Manager and City Manager Johnson's work, a good start, but this kind of just puts the cherry on top for now and updates it for today. And I think the staff will be really happy that it's short, it's concise, it's clear, it has the 5 steps. I appreciate that it ends with evaluate, as some of the other council members have mentioned. It's important to go back and whether you're just evaluating for yourself so you can do it differently next time, or you're actually taking a pause and changing directions midstream to make sure that you get all the feedback that you need. Both are a good use of that last step. And thank you also for clarifying. I know you mentioned this earlier, but that just because you start out maybe with Inform doesn't mean you won't move into the other areas. And depending on the size of the project, you might go through all three of these areas of Inform, Consult, and Collaborate. So great job, and look forward to supporting it.
Great, thank you. If no other comments, well, I want to echo, I agree on the great job, and I think I know you've also worked so hard on the website and it looks amazing, and I know it's a different topic, but the reason I bring it up is when searching for e-notifications, it doesn't come up. So just as we're in that process of continuing with the website and improvements, hopefully we'll see that go hand in hand. And I think it's wild in a way to think about just in 2015, Open City Hall didn't even exist at that time, and our Open Town Hall didn't even exist at that time. And such huge changes have happened since then. So really appreciate it. And, and I know that this is called the endorsing the diversity, equity, inclusion update to the public engagement noticing manual. But I really look at this as it's just improving communications for the whole community on everything the city does. And I think that's the whole point about inclusion. It's not just for specific entities, it's for the whole community. And so I think you've really done that with this manual. And I look forward to hearing what the employees say, staff say about the training, the current staff and future staff, and what they want to see going forward. So I will leave this off to Vice Mayor Marks to make her motion.
All right, I'd like to move the staff recommendation for item 8B.
Thank you, Councilmember Shorsman.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Can we have roll call, please?
Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes.
Councilmember Shorsman?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, and the motion passes 5-0. Thank you so much. Okay, and our last and final business item of the day is amending the council policies and procedures manual to implement hybrid city council meetings. And I believe City Clerk Teresa Parrington will be presenting the report.
Okay. Have to make sure I do what I tell everybody else. Look up. Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. The item before you is regarding amendments to Council's policies and procedures for the implementation of hybrid meetings. Just a little bit of background. So when the COVID pandemic hit, Governor Newsom issued an emergency declaration allowing changes to the Brown Act, relaxing the regulations regarding teleconferencing, for legislative bodies. Basically, you didn't have to adhere to the existing telecommunications regulations. Then AB 361 was signed, which then further added regulations to how that's done, basically saying that every 30 days, the council had to make a finding that they were in an emergency situation for them to continue using these relaxed regulations. And this was also all implemented during the shelter in home. Once the shelter in home was removed, actually it was phased, so it was relaxed and then removed. Council came back into in-person meetings. However, there was also discussions about maybe needing to have hybrid meetings because for certain people who couldn't attend. We couldn't do that because our equipment in the chambers and the hearing room required a two-system process to do that. We did do a couple of meetings where we allowed staff and a council member here and there, but we couldn't widely allow everyone to do it because we only had 2 call-in lines, and to do all of that wouldn't have let it. In February of 2022, council authorized the upgrade of the equipment in the council chambers and the council hearing room. However, because of supply chain issues, we didn't get the equipment until December. But in September of 2022, AB 2449 was signed and became effective January 2023. What that AB 2449 did was it relaxed, but also relaxed with requirements, the teleconferencing allowance for legislative bodies. So currently, the Brown Act now has 2 separate sections for teleconferencing. The traditional, which has been in place since forever, which requires any member wanting to teleconference to have the physical address of wherever they are noticed on the agenda. The agenda must be posted at that physical location. They have to allow the public to come in and be with them when they meet. Public should be able to make public comment from that same location, and we have to ensure that the location has ADA access. That is still in place. However, the new regulations, which are more relaxed under AB 2449, allows individual members increased flexibility to participate in meetings via teleconference in the event of a personal emergency without a declared state of emergency. But again, it adds additional regulations on how that is done. So to implement AB 2449, and I want to note here that it is not required that council do that. It is an option for you to do that. It requires that a quorum of the council, in our case, 3 members, must be in one physical location, which is identified on the agenda. If that quorum cannot be met, the meeting cannot be called to order. The 2 reasons or circumstances where you can ask to have teleconferencing by a legislative body member are what the legislation calls just cause, and just cause is defined as needing to take giving care to a dependent, having a contagious disease, a need related to a physical or mental disability, or if you are on official government travel. Just cause is capped at 2 meetings per calendar year, regardless of the number of meetings you have in a year. Emergency circumstances is used in the case of physical or family medical emergencies that prevent council members from attending in person. That is capped on 20% of the regular meetings within a calendar year. In our instance, that's 4 council meetings. The other provisions that must be implemented for AB 2449 are the agendas must provide how the public can observe or provide public comment via a teleconference. Just to kind of clarify that, it's like when we put the Zoom link on the cover of the agenda and anybody could join via Zoom. Again, the public must be allowed to make public comment either via teleconference or in person. not both. All votes taken must be a roll call vote. We currently do that, so that's not a really big change for us. This one could be a big problem or cause some problems with our meetings if for any reason our Zoom, in our instance, because that's the platform we would use, is disrupted, meaning Zoom has a problem and they go down, or our system in the network here in the city goes down, we would have to suspend the meeting until we could get it back up. And it says a reasonable time, and that's not defined. It's whatever we think is a reasonable time. And one other thing to note is, due to the specialized equipment that's needed for hybrid meetings or Zoom meetings, the only meetings that we would be allowed to do with the AB 2449 are meetings in the City Hall. They either in this room or in the council hearing room, because both rooms are equipped now with the right equipment for that. So there's a lot of it. This gave us a lot more implementation, but it is manageable. So the other things that relate specifically to the council members is council members must make a request at the beginning of a meeting to participate through teleconference. They have to give a general reason why they need to do this. It's very general. I mean, it spells out no more than 20 words, and you don't have to disclose any medical information. You also have to disclose if there is any individuals over the age of 18 in the room present with you from your teleconferencing location, and also the relationship you have with that person. If you're participating via teleconference, you must have your audio and video on at all times. And then, of course, the council, before we start the meeting, must approve or deny the request to teleconference. The parts that have to deal with the clerk and the actual meeting are, of course, the agenda has to have the teleconferencing link on the cover of the agenda, also with instructions on how to provide public comment during the meeting. We'll add a section at the very beginning of the agenda that is for AB 2449 teleconferencing requests. If we don't have any, we just go blow by it. If one of you weren't here, the mayor would ask, is this person absent, or do they have a request? And then you would make your request. You don't have to be in the room. It can be virtually. Public comment. The recommendation I am making is that we modify the way we handle public comment, because as I said earlier, they have to have the opportunity to participate either in person or teleconference. So we would open the public comment and give a reasonable time for the public to get their comments in. Then we would stop taking public comment requests. And then I would let you know how many people in room or virtually would like to speak. That way, that will allow us two things. One, we know exactly how many people want to speak. So if we need to adjust times, that gives us that opportunity. And then everybody gets a fair and equal amount of time if we do have to reduce it. Also, we will take the in-person first and then those via teleconference, and we won't go back and forth. It's just all in-person, then all teleconference. Another change is we're working on a new timer that's actually on the screen. So everybody in the room, everybody will be able to see that. It will have an audible sound so you can also hear it. But that will just make it easier than the two that we have right now. So one thing is this could be applicable to all of the advisory bodies. We're not recommending that at this time. And the reason for that is hybrid meetings require a lot of work. I mean, I think you've seen me having to do this. But to do it for all of the advisory bodies, there's not always, right now don't have all the staffing. Plus, we're not sure how exactly. The one thing we did learn through COVID was when we first implemented, it was for the first 3 months, we were constantly changing to make sure that we got it right. And so we want to make sure this time that we have a good solid footing before we start introducing other bodies. I did add a new recommendation that we are looking at the Planning Commission in 3 months. But all other advisory bodies, we would go in a tiered fashion. The ones that are handled by the clerk's office, which are your larger ones, which usually have larger audiences, ARC, CHC, and trees, the clerk's office staff, so we have another person already assigned there. But then we would have to evaluate the rest to see what the time constraints are and the staffing needs are, because some of the your other advisor bodies don't have actual recording secretaries. So you have a staff liaison who acts as the recording secretary and is doing presentations, and to throw in adding Zoom meeting to that could be, I'm sorry, it is a lot. So that's why we're recommending a tiered approach, and evaluate those after we do the next advisory body update, and then, of course, at the beginning of the next year. So you, as I said in the beginning, you do have alternatives. You could decide not to implement a hybrid option at all. I don't think that's the direction, but that is an option. You could decide not to implement the AB 2449 portion of the hybrid meetings, which means then it's at your discretion of how you handle those meetings and what you do. You could make additional revisions to the council policies and procedures for hybrid meetings, or, and again, this one is really not recommended, you could ask us to implement all of them at one time. With that concludes my recommendation, and I know I went through that really fast, but any questions? And again, the recommendation is to adopt a resolution amending policies and procedures for the implementation of hybrid meetings and for compliance with AB 2449. If you choose not to do AB 2449, you'll notice that I stuck it all in one section, and all we have to do is just take that one out.
Thank you so much. That was fast, but very, very thorough. I believe Councilmember Shoresman has a question.
So just to clarify, if we implemented hybrid meetings, but we didn't implement 2449, what would that look like in terms of what council members had to do if they were not going to be present? And yeah.
They could still use the traditional method, whereby we would have to put their address on the agenda ahead of, we would have to know ahead of time, put their address on the agenda, post the agenda at their location, and allow the public into wherever they are to participate in the meeting with them and all that. So that's the traditional way. As in the past, a couple of our council members have actually been out of the country, so the possibility is remote, but say if you were sick and you wanted to do it, you would have to let someone in your house.
So if you implement 2449, you don't have to do those other, you don't have to allow the public into where you are, and you don't have to post it on the door, but otherwise,
correct,
you do have to request permission of the council before the meeting starts. And
every meeting would be a hybrid meeting, because we would not have the luxury of knowing ahead of time.
But we're planning, well, okay. I think I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Marks.
Yeah, just to clarify, so the only time that public comment, correct me if I'm wrong, the only time that public comment could be handled both virtually and in person would be if under 2449 we declare one person or two city council members declared that they wanted to participate virtually. So if we're all here and no one is appearing virtually, that would mean that there's no virtual public comment. Is that correct? Or how does that work?
Well, that would be at your discretion. I would say no, because that's very confusing to the public, and they wouldn't know whether or not. So that's why I said, if you're going to do 2449, allow yourselves to do 2449. Every meeting we have will be a hybrid meeting, and if people are watching from home, they would have to be able to, because there's such a short time that we would know if you were sick that day, I couldn't post an agenda and let the public know, and they couldn't. So that's why everything will be hybrid from that point on.
City Attorney, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to clarify, there is no requirement that a council member be remote. There is just a requirement that if a council member is remote, that same opportunity is afforded to the public. And there is a requirement that there is at least a quorum of the council present here physically.
Right, but if we had a meeting like tonight, we are not getting any virtual public comment, right? So I just wanted,
If we were hybrid, we would.
Hmm?
If we were hybrid, we would.
Right. Okay, but what, my question is, what triggers us being hybrid?
Today, if we decide to vote on it and say we'd like to have all of our future meetings be hybrid, that's what our decision
Right.
is today. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Schwarzman.
Yeah, so I think the way I'm thinking about it is that we're sort of deciding on two things tonight. We're deciding whether or not we want to do hybrid meetings, and we're also deciding whether or not we want to implement 2449. Is that correct? So they're related, but they're separate, and just doesn't say in the recommendation. Oh, it does, and city council hybrid meetings and compliance with, okay.
Yeah, we think that's the cleanest and clearest. I think the predictability for both the public and for staff to deal with the technology, and then have clarity about how council's going to call the public, et cetera, and how you're going to manage public comment. I think that all just creates a fluid framework for us to, be able to have some predictability with, both you and staff and the public.
So one of the other, my other question is that one of the concerns that I've heard voiced about going to hybrid meetings is that we could have people Zoom in from all over the country that have no relationship to San Luis Obispo, but yet they could Zoom in and comment. And I think I saw something in the staff report that, and maybe this is the case now, but we don't necessarily enforce it, that the commenter would be asked to state their name and where they live. Is that one of our requirements now, or did I misread that somewhere?
City Attorney.
Yeah, that can't be a requirement.
Okay.
You can request that people do that, but you can't even require that they identify themselves.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that too. Thank you.
City Clerk? Okay. And I think that's the whole point, if I remember correctly, of closing off the virtual public comment, is that you're telling us how many, and therefore, based on the in-person and the hybrid, that would identify if we're going to cut it down to 2 or 1 minute public comment.
Yes, and that's correct. And really, strangely enough, you all know that during COVID, we thought our numbers were going to go through the roof, and they, except for a couple of meetings, they really didn't. Our numbers actually went down, and they haven't picked up since we've been back in person, but our agenda correspondence has remained the same and has been quite high. So yeah, it is a concern, but we haven't seen that happen yet.
Thank you. Councilmember Pease.
I did, to follow up just on I don't know if we want to correct this while we're here, but page 345 of the agenda packet, it does say address the council, giving their name and address.
You can request it, it just doesn't mean they have to require it.
Yeah. We do the same thing as with our public comment cards. I mean, people, we ask them to put their name down. If they don't, we would still call them. Or we'd have them come up to the podium. So as long as it doesn't say we require them, it is fine. But we could, further change that if council felt.
I mean, if that's working, I would read it the other way, but that's fine. Okay.
Okay, if no other questions, public comment?
None.
Thank you. I mean, I know we did get some agenda correspondence on, yes, please do this. And I know I have heard that comment as well, Councilmember Shorsman. And I will say from the numerous people we've met from the different cities, it's been interesting to hear, you know, what they're doing with hybrid or not hybrid. And I think this is a way to increase the ability to have accessibility. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to jump in on it, and I know that too, but I think it is nice to be able to have that opportunity. Councilmember Shorsman?
Yeah, I know we didn't receive a lot of agenda correspondence on this tonight, but I will say that during the campaign, I did hear from lots of community members who, you know, have small kids at home and they want to participate, and they're probably at home watching on YouTube right now, but they weren't able to comment tonight in person because they have other family obligations. So I know this is an interest. I also have been to many Brown Act meetings that haven't had what I would say, you know, unruly or, you know, hours worth of public comment. I'm sure it can happen, and maybe it will, but I haven't seen that in my personal experience. So I sort of feel like this is the right thing to do, to give it a try and find out how it would work. The one concern that I do have is on the holdup of meetings if we have technical issues, and I guess that's just something that goes along with this, and we'll just have to play it by ear and figure it out as we go along. If we do have significant issues, nothing is undoable. I'm assuming if we go this route and we, I guess this is a question, if we go this route and we try it out for a while and we have continual electronic issues and it starts prolonging our meetings consistently, then this is something that we could undo if we chose to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease. Oh.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I support this. I think that it is good for the public, and it's, you know, it's good for us to be able to, I mean, you know, if we have an exposure, there's a new reality for us. So I think that's important to have the flexibility, because otherwise I think you know, just going hybrid without the 2449 restriction, I think, you know, a few years ago, I would have been like, well, gosh, if you're really sick, just, you know, stay home that night and your colleagues will, you know, be able to meet or whatever. But just the reality is it's a different world. So I do think it's worth going after both of these. And having to cut off the number ahead of time, I want to make sure that we check back on that. My concern is that sometimes speakers will come up and another speaker in the audience will trigger. So we lose the opportunity for that conversation or follow-up. So I think we can try it this way and see if there's concern, but I do want to make sure that people feel like their process isn't being cut short.
Mm-hmm. City Manager?
Just got to follow up with the city attorney and I were just having a sidebar. I think we're okay on the address and name because it's related to applicant representatives and applicants, and so in that instance, we want to. I think it's for the record we can require that information, but for general public comment, that's not required.
That makes sense. Thank you, Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, this all feels very much in line with the rest of the things that we were covering this evening. I'm really excited to have hybrid meetings like Councilmember Shorsman. This is something that has come up over and over again. And as far as just expanding our communication and equity and access to the meetings, this is a no-brainer for me. I know it comes with a huge can of worms, and I am very much worried about technology and all of the other issues that come along with it. But I think it's definitely worth giving a try.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Marks.
Yeah, I'm willing to give it a try. I have to say the Integrated Waste Management Authority meetings use the hybrid method. And well, we're covering the whole county, so it's really good if somebody lives in Shandon or Napomo that they don't have to drive to San Luis Obispo in order to say 3 minutes worth of I don't like what you're doing, or I do like what you're doing, or here's what you should do. So I'd like to give it a try, but then also have us look at it again after maybe a year or 6 months or something like that, so we could just get a check-in, like how do we think it's working, and do we need to make any improvements? But I agree with COVID, and hopefully will be the last nasty virus like that we have to deal with. It's a whole new reality, and we need to be able to accommodate ourselves and also the public. So I do support this.
Thank you. I think similar to what Whitney Sintesi shared earlier, we have to review and evaluate, right? Yeah. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, sorry, I had one more question, I guess, to follow up on in terms of the Planning Commission and other advisory bodies after that. I can see the value, especially with the Planning Commission and some of our busier, more community, our advisory bodies that have more community interest. Are we concerned that rolling this out to all of our advisory bodies, we have a lot of them, would result in additional staff expense that we haven't already thought about in the financial planning process so far?
Yes, that's correct. And as part of the equipment authorization, you also authorized a half-time position in my office, and that's how we can do the first, I would say 5 or 6 of the bodies, but I don't think we could do all 17 with just another half-time person. As I said, the ones that the clerk's office staff are those the first 5 or 6 that we'll do.
So would your plan be then to roll out a planning commission first, see how that goes, then roll out the others with the halftime person, and then come back to council for an additional analysis or more authority for another?
Once we've talked with the actual departments who manage those bodies, to see whether or not they were willing or they wanted to, whether they had staff to assign to it, or we would have to come back for more staffing. That's how we would do it. And coincidentally, we're looking at it towards the beginning of the year when we start looking at the mid-year financials and everything to see whether or not that's even doable based on staffing needs.
Okay, that's all my questions. I'm prepared to make a motion if nobody else has anything else.
Okay, thank you. I guess I have one more thing. So when we talk about the public comment announcement, I also have kind of the same thought you do, Councilmember Pease, around sometimes people come in for that one item, whether in person or virtual in the future, and if they miss that moment where we get the cutoff, I do get a little bit concerned around how do we truly allow our community to put in their input. So, you know, I'm comfortable with doing this for now, but I think as we continue with reevaluating and reviewing and evaluating, looking at how many people we are missing through that process, I think will be important. And I think also whether it's myself or our future mayors, making sure that we make that announcement in the beginning of each item that public comment will be open until the end of the staff report or whatever the comment is, so that we can make sure that individuals get enough time to know that their public comment is going to, or ability is going to end. City Manager?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I think you raise a good point, and I think from a practical matter, I've seen this done really well over the years. Is, you know, people leave the room to go to the bathroom, or they go have a sidebar conversation outside, and you know, I think it's always the mayor's prerogative if there's reasonable, you know, and explanations about why they missed the comment period. I think, you know, they can appeal to the clerk, and then the clerk can use the judgment and bring it to the mayor's attention, and then you can always reopen, you know, that public comment period to let folks back in.
That makes sense. And I remember when COVID happened, we would usually know if there was a particular issue and there was 25 people waiting in the queue, that we could say, okay, we have so many more minutes, and then we're going to go ahead and know how many people we have to talk on that issue. City Clerk, did you want to?
And we do that currently when their clerk misses a speaker card. We, make exceptions all the time. So it's definitely your prerogative to do that.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Pease. Sorry.
Well, I mean, as we're talking about it, I wonder if we're, solving a problem that isn't. Maybe we should start the other way and just kind of keep the current practice where when we know that there's a whole bunch, then we, if there's one or two that are going to slip in, but if we just call for it and then if there's, just don't change it. That, I don't know. Actually, as we're talking about it, I feel like I'd rather do that process. We can call, see if there's a whole lot of raised hands, but we don't have to say, and then we're cutting off the, we can call for comments and make a judgment call.
Yeah, I think it goes back to reviewing and evaluating. Is if we see this as becoming a larger problem, we deal with that and make a change potentially. If we see that it's working out, then that's great. Did you have an additional comment? No, okay. Council, maybe? Councilmember Shoresman.
So clarification, are the two of you now saying that you'd like to just keep the public comment open as we do now, or that you want to follow staff's recommendation of starting out with there's like a closed period where you have to put in the comments, but it's mayor's prerogative to allow additional if there's...
Keep as staff recommendation. I was just concerned, and then thank you, City Manager, for reminding me that there is that ability.
Oh, I thought we were going to maybe consider dropping that. Let's see, all requests to speak should be submitted prior to the start of the public comment period. My thought would actually be to strike that. So it still talks about, and this is on page 344 of the agenda packet, those requesting to speak in person will be called first. Then those requesting to speak via teleconference will be called. And then the suggested language is all requests to speak should be submitted prior to the start of the public comment period. I would be comfortable deleting that.
I think that's correct, though, because that's kind of once
I mean, it's
all of
not a
this,
shall, so I guess it gives you flexibility.
right? And once the staff respond, there's the questions of the staff after the staff report, and then public comment. So that gives the individual the time to hear all of the staff report, all of our questions. Then that's the
But not all
cutoff.
the
So,
other public comments.
oh, I
Okay.
see.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's the only, but again, I think it depends on what the practice is. It says should be submitted, but I guess again, there's some
Yeah, there's
flexibility
something
there, so
blatantly.
I think it maybe doesn't matter.
City Attorney?
If I can make a suggestion, we can perhaps encourage people, if they believe they might want to participate, that they should so indicate to the clerk, and then they can always opt out because they didn't hear something from another commenter they needed to respond to, or somebody else had already said it. But that would give you a better sense up front of the volume of speakers that you're looking at.
That's a good idea, too. Thank you. Vice Mayor Marks? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councilmember Shoresman.
Well, I think I agree with the city attorney. I'd rather stick with the staff recommended way of doing it. And I think it's about how we frame it and how it's stated. And then if we see that it doesn't work, then we can make adjustments afterwards. But again, I'll make the motion to adopt the resolution amending council policies and procedures to implement hybrid meetings for the city council and to comply with Assembly Bill 2449.
Vice Mayor Marks, did you have a comment before we move to motion?
I wanted to second it.
Okay, perfect. There we go.
And I also want to say that I think it's important to, given the unknowns about what this is going to mean for the city clerk's office and staff, I think it's good to at least place a kind of a limit on the process, with the understanding that we need to be flexible at times as well.
Thank you. And I think I just wanted to add my thoughts on this one. Just, I mean, it's kind of already been said. I've already said some of it, but I also think that not just are we increasing the accessibility, we're also kind of going along with our climate goals of trying to reduce GHG. So if someone's coming here just to give their 3 minutes, they get to stay home, which means they don't get in their car or have to get on their bike for their 3 minutes comment. So I think that is really going along with what we are intending, as well as the accessibility and allowing our community to be part of the process. And I also just wanted to say I really appreciate the tiered approach, because I do think the Planning Commission, HRC, maybe ARC, I mean, there are advisory bodies that we do probably want to see go down this road. Obviously, the Personnel Board and Construction Appeals probably aren't going that road. So thank you very much for the motion and the second. And can we have roll call?
Councilmember Schwarzman? Yes. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Councilmember Marks? I mean, Vice Mayor Marks?
Council members, okay. Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you for the work on this. Thank you for the dealing with all the supply chain fun, and thank you for making our meetings even more accessible. Appreciate it. Wow, so all the voting is done. All the main topics are done. Now we get to a little bit of the fun and get to share the liaison reports and communications. Vice Mayor Marks.
Oh, thank you. Well, this has been a busy time. We had Earth Day on the 22nd, which I participated in. The Chumash the Chumash Marine Sanctuary has teamed up with Stanford University to do some longitudinal studies of the marine life, and that booth was fantastic. And then on the 25th, I was asked to take the mayor's place for a minute and welcome everybody to the San Luis Obispo International Film Festival. It was a great crowd, I must say. It was wonderful. The Channel Islands Counties League meeting on Friday the 28th was well attended, well organized. I think our staff did a great job. And then on the 29th, I went to the firefighters picnic. It was held to welcome the 7 new recruits and their families. There was a bounce house. There were tons of kids. It was great. And they gave the Greg Otto Award to firefighter Gonzalez. And I just wanted to highlight that. I knew Greg Otto. He died at a young age of pancreatic cancer. But he was the one who really spearheaded the paramedic program, the EMT program for a fire department. And he was a very kind and compassionate person. And so they created this award in order to instill in the new people and to carry on the tradition of being very compassionate toward victims. Anyway, it was excellent. And on the 30th, I attended the Holocaust remembrance ceremony in Atascadero. Chief Scott was there, and a number of other city council members from other cities. And unfortunately, just because of the rise in anti-Semitism and violence, the synagogue has had to make a safety fence all the way around it. And they have security guards now that are specially trained as people come in to make sure that everyone is going to be peaceful. I just wanted to mention some upcoming things. There is the sheep shearing shindig at City Farm Slow on May 6th. It starts at noon. It's going to have real sheep, real shearing, and real spinning of wool. And it's a family friendly event. Kids under 12 are free. And then on May 16th, the Integrated Waste Management Authority is doing the first in-depth seminar for county-wide elected officials and solid waste staff, not just in the cities, but also in the CSDs. And we are inviting the county as a courtesy and their staff. So there's going to be state officials and especially focusing on AB 1383 and dealing with organic waste, which is a huge challenge. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you. Last Wednesday, the 26th, Councilmember Pease and I had the honor of coming to the police department promotions here in City Hall, and that was a real treat to honor all of those folks. And then later that day, I got to take a food bank tour with my daughter, which was really great to get into all of the back warehouse and learn a lot about where exactly all of the food that's collected ends up going and how it's all distributed. It was really incredible. On Thursday, the 27th, I had the honor of taking a tour of Grizzly Academy with Chief Sansa out at California National Guard, learning a lot about how their program is expanding and some of the new programs they're looking at getting. I'm not allowed to talk about it yet, but they have something cool coming. And then later that day, I went up to the Nacimiento Commission to approve the annual budget and get an overview of some of the temporary and long-term repairs that are potentially coming to the pipeline, which unfortunately have a slightly longer timeline than we were anticipating. So I'm looking forward to coming back with some more specific updates for you all once we have more information.
Councilmember Pease.
Thank you. Just a couple quick updates. One is the SCLC, which is the Student Community Liaison Committee, meets monthly. We rotate participating in that, and they had a really well-run strategic planning session for that group in terms of kind of quickly helping to focus and help folks discern about what they want to get out of that organization. So it was really effective in looking at their organizational structure, wanting to continue to meet monthly, wanting to be proactive and address real concerns rather than kind of the exchange of information. And one of the items that they would like to take on during the year with plenty of time is the St. Patrick's Day events and how to kind of work collaboratively and what are some other options there. So I was really impressed with the student leadership on that effort and looking forward to seeing what comes out of that. And then the other one I just wanted to mention briefly is that May 11th, next Thursday, Latino Outreach Councils has their monthly town hall, and the focus on this month is Pride, in anticipation of Pride the next month, and kind of connecting with the Latino community there. And Dusty Collier-Worth of the Pride and Diversity Center is going to be there for us.
Nice. Thank you so much. Councilmember Shorsman.
Yes, along with some of you, I attended the Earth Day celebration, not this past weekend, but the weekend before at Laguna Lake. And special thanks to our Senator John Laird and Assemblymember Don Addis for attending and participating in that, as well as the Chumash elders that did a really nice blessing on the land to sort of open the celebration. Attended the Channel Cities dinner at the Madonna Inn with all of you, and a Construction Board of Appeals meeting this past week. Pretty interesting meeting, and just another opportunity to be so grateful for all our community members that really dig into some pretty intense, important topics on behalf of the city. And a couple of reminders, just another plug for Bike Month, especially if you happen to have a high schooler at San Luis High. Tomorrow morning, the Mountain Bike Club is doing a bike breakfast and doing bike maintenance at the high school at 7 a.m. for those high schoolers that are willing to get up at 7 a.m. I'm sure they'll have a great time. And then also tomorrow evening, there is a Diablo Canyon Power Plant assessment and NRC licensing meeting at our county government center from, I believe it's 6 o'clock, looking for 6 to 9 p.m. Then there is a hybrid option on that as well. So that's it for me.
Awesome. As explained by many of my colleagues, this is a very, very busy time. I will not go over the ones we already went to together, but I do really want to say, except for this one, is I want to say thank you for the staff for the Channel Counties Division dinner and meeting. It was so well put together, and we're so pleased and so proud of our city and what we did together. Also, I wanted to thank Don Addis for...
Wait, who's the new president?
I was going to share that in a minute. I wanted to thank Assemblymember Don Addis for coming and speaking with all of our attendees. And then I was sworn in as the president of the Channel Counties Division. So I look forward to serving with you all and leading and going from there. Also wanted to send a congratulations out virtually to Sam Andrews and Zach Stever. Sam Andrews is the new ASI president for Cal Poly, and Zach is the new Cuesta ASI president, or ASCC president. So that's very exciting. And then for the SLO Film Festival, thank you very much, Vice Mayor, for speaking, as well as the fact that it's still virtual this week. So if you wanted to watch some and you didn't get a chance to, you get to at this point. And tomorrow is the advisory body quarterly meeting. I tell you, if you have a chance to look online and see all the advisory bodies have been doing so much work, it's amazing. And then there is the Diablo public meeting tomorrow evening at 6. And so Councilmember Shoresman and I will be going to the government part ahead of time. And lastly, the Friday is the grand opening of the Frost Center at Cal Poly. I'll be attending, and it's just a giant building that has a lot of labs that I wish were there when I was in school. I might have stayed in my major anyway. So thank you so much for being here today, sharing everything. We have an exciting special closed session meeting next week on the 9th, and then we'll be back to our regular meeting on the 16th. See you all then, and thank you and good night.